Hello and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining me today on the King's Monologue. We're going to be critiquing one Mr. Bassem Youssef, who has recently done an interview on a channel called 154 Africa, which is a podcast that's hosted by the comedian called Godfrey, who I really like as a personality, not just as a comedian. I think he's a very stand-up character. I think he, in terms of his political outlook and his perspectives on our position in society as Africans, as Black people, he's a fellow Nigerian who's migrated. Well, he's been raised in American. I'm not sure how many generations he's now, American, or if he just classifies himself as a Nigerian in America. But I tend to agree with most of his takes. I think he's very brave considering his position and considering his notoriety. He could be a lot further on in his career in terms of Hollywood, in terms of getting cast for roles, in terms of being on different platforms like Netflix. He's incredibly talented as a comedian and as a impressionist. Is that what they're called? Impersonator, impressionist? I'm not sure what the correct term is for it, but he's incredibly talented in that arena, and he could really make his life a lot easier by just being a sellout, like a lot of people decide to do. But he's decided he doesn't want to do that, and he's decided that he wants to have some integrity, and I have a lot of respect for him. I'm sure he's not everybody's flavor of the month, but for me personally, I respect him. Yeah, I respect him a lot. Let's just say that I rate him very highly. So he's put I'm going to say fellow comedian, although I have to probably engage with some of Bassem Youssef's stand-up to figure out that he's a comedian, because all I've ever heard from him is angry political diatribe against Black people. That might be my exposure. That might be my fault. It might be my fault that I've only heard negative anti-Black diatribe from him, because that's the only plane of existence at which we collide, essentially. I have never sought after his political commentary. I also know that he's quite politically outspoken as an Arab nationalist, and we're going to get I have a feeling we're going to get some of that today. But yesterday, my messages on several platforms were going bing, 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 because this interview dropped and he touches on the subject of Black Egypt. Now, I do have some exposure with him before doing this. He did this on Piers Morgan, and I think, did I react to that? I'm not sure if I did, actually. Maybe it was in my plans to react to it and I never came around to it, or did I react to it on the channel? Someone put a reminder if you if I did react to it, because I can't fully remember. But needless to say, his takes were really typical. If I'm going to be honest, his takes he has a very typical PHARONISM, modern Egyptian outlook. He's very anti-Black, and he tries to mute it and closet it, but it's very, very clear and apparent that he's anti-Black. He has a very fallacious take on history in terms of the relatedness between Egypt and the Maghreb and the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant, as all Arab nationalists do. And he feigns as though there is camaraderie between him and Black people, whilst simultaneously making sure that he excludes anyone who classifies himself as Black from having any access to the ancient Egyptian civilization. So he's just basically writing straight out of Hawas's playbook here. But obviously in the arena of ancient Egypt, he's far less informed. And so he just speaks from this passionate political place, like a lot of modern Egyptians do, just based on their education system. And you have to understand the modern Egyptian education system, when it comes to the ancient Egyptian society, is as fuss. All pharaohs were your uncles, all queens were your aunties, and we built the pyramids. And that's pretty much it. That's as far as it goes. Don't expect them to know much more than that, because the honest truth is they don't. A lot of them just don't know much more than that. You'll be lucky if they can feed back to you the amount of dynasties there are. Now, I'm not saying that as some kind of a flex. I study ancient Egypt. I don't expect everybody else in the world to study ancient Egypt. But they present, as he does, themselves as experts on the subject and as people who exclusively have access to talk about ancient. We are Egyptians, so only we can talk about ancient Egypt. Like that's what you get from them. They have this, I would say, a perverse relationship with the ancient Egyptian society, and they're totally out of step with what it was. They don't understand the culture. They're entirely separated. But we'll get into all that, I'm sure, as we actually review some of the things that he says. So I don't want to go into a complete and utter diatribe, but I just want to paint the picture for those of you who don't know who he is, what to expect from here on in. I'm going to address some of the comments now, because those have been blowing up crazy. Liz was one of the first people, although she wasn't the first, but one of the first to like tap me up. And she was like, oh, please react to this king, please. You know, so I think she was sizably irritated by it. And I don't, I could probably see why. I've only like played like 5 or so minutes and I thought, you know what, I've seen enough. Let me respond. Let me just like shelve this now and let me do a live reaction with the community. Let me see what's going on there. But shout out everybody who's here, by the way. We are at 85 already, which is great for an incredibly impromptu stream, as 4DVXX has said. Let's just see if there's anything like urgent. Please, can you make clarification on, okay, NE, okay, so let me put that on the screen. Let me see what you're saying here. If you got any questions, guys, please don't hesitate to drop me a little super chat. Been running low on those recently, so, and obviously your generosity, if you can afford it, is very much appreciated. If you appreciate the time that I commit to this work. So Kola has said, can you make clarification on I think NEU, I think NUE 001. So that's New Ararat man, I think you're talking about. This is being given as proof of the existence of current Levant population in the region since 2800 BC. See, I think that's quite cute. If I'm going to be totally honest with you, I think that's quite cute that they're reaching into the New Ararat man study to say, hey, you know, the ancient Egyptians were Arabs, considering that when there's so many problems with that. If you want to get a deep dive into that study, we've covered that. Look through my live streams. And I think I had 2 or 3 live streams back to back where we literally go through the entire paper and we help people to understand. But to put that in a very, very quick and brief nutshell, they use a method called QPADM to ascertain the balance of genetics in the New Ararat man sample. And what this essentially did is, from an existing pool that they'd already chosen, so a pre-selected pool of samples, they ran his DNA through, and then the way that works is an admixture analysis. And the way admixture analysis works is it clusters you by percentage to who you're closest to throughout your genome. So it turned out he came out 80% African, North African, by the way, Neolithic North African. So this is ancient North African, not modern North African. So he came out 80% Neolithic North African and 20% Neolithic Levantine. So once again, these are ancient or beyond ancient Levantine and ancient North African. That's what he came up at. Now, the 20% Levant is not modern Levant, it's ancient Levant. And the 80% North African is not modern North African, it's ancient North African. And we have to also clarify that when they did that admixture analysis, they didn't put in any local African samples to compare against. So you didn't have like Neolithic West African, Neolithic East African, Neolithic Central African. They didn't have any of that. All they had was these mixture of Levantine, European, and North African samples that he could have clustered with. So it would have been impossible for him to come out 100%, I don't know, let's say Nubian or 100% Sudanese, because they didn't include those samples. So it was impossible for him to come out any more African than he did. So essentially, they gave him a pool of samples which could have brought him out anywhere in between Europe, African, and Asian, and he came out majority African, with the closest, obviously, those Neolithic North Africans will be the closest thing to modern Africans they had in that sample set. And then only 20% is Levantine. And once again, we're still talking about ancient Levantine. So I think it's quite cute that they look at that and they take that as some kind of a victory. Like, oh, well, he was 20. Like, first of all, you've got a very crappy sample set there. So in my view, it's entirely ignorable. You can just ignore that study. That study's a joke. But let's say you do take it seriously. It still isn't clustering like 80% Levantine or something. It was 20, like a tiny amount. You got the Levant, and it's ancient Levant, who, in my opinion, would have been black. Those people would have been clustering with, you know, probably Natufians and, you know, other ancient peoples who were closely related to Africans, but just happened to leave the African continent. So just putting that in context, a bit of a side note, but just to help you to kind of like understand what exactly went on in that study there, because it was all just fugazi essentially. But anyway, let's start now, because I think that's enough of a preamble. We're like 12 minutes in. I think we should just like jump on top of what's being discussed, because that would be more interesting than anything. Now, I did want to start with, before we go straight into what has he said about Egypt, which we'll come on to, I wanted to just start off with this video, which will help you to understand a bit about who Bassem Youssef is. So I find him to be someone who is very much he's very much like a really good example of what you get from many modern, I would say, kind of Arabs, North Africans. So modern Arabs and North Africans, and in their condescending view of black people in general. I think he can't help it. He talks down to black people whenever he's in front of them. And I think when I watched this interview, I kind of felt like he was constantly talking down, and he can't help it. They're condescending, and they also think they carry this kind of thing where they think they can basically prompt the black community for camaraderie whenever they need it. So they can be as racist as they want in their day-to-day life. And a lot of these Egyptians are horribly racist, by the way. And I get the feeling that he's not exempt from that. So they can be as racist as they want in their day-to-day life. But when they need a little bit of help with the white man, when they need a little bit of help with the West, that's when they want to kind of like go, hey, yeah, it's the same struggle. It's the same struggle, man. Yeah, we're as we're going through the same struggle as you, man. And they want to try and equate themselves to us. But meantime, outside of their little fights or occasional problems with the white man, they're trying to align themselves with whiteness 24/7. They would always prefer to be classified as white, apart from when the white man starts dropping bombs on them. That's when they all of a sudden start talking about, hey, yeah, we're brothers. You need to be on our side. And that's why when it comes to a lot of these political conflicts that are taking place currently in our world, I am happy to sit on the fence. Okay, I'm happy to not take a position. I'm happy not to be a mouthpiece. You can be your own mouthpiece, because I can't be a mouthpiece for people who, yes, you're being oppressed right now, and I feel really bad for you. But at the same time, I can't be a mouthpiece for people who I know as soon as they get any kind of liberation, any kind of emancipation, any kind of freedom from their oppression, they're going to start persecuting people who look like me. And this is one of the big issues that I had even with the entire kind of like Middle Eastern situation at the moment. It's like, respectfully, when this Cleopatra thing was going on and all these Egyptians were jumping on us, I had Palestinians jumping in to this discussion, talking about leave our history alone. It's got nothing to do with black people. I'm like, hey, ain't you guys got your own problems to deal with? You're up in my comments, up in my comments, telling me that black people had nothing to do with ancient Egypt. You know, it's kind of like, and this is, anyway, let's jump in. I think I've said enough now at this point. Let's jump in and see what he has to say. By the way, hit a one to just make sure, let me know in the chat that you can hear it. It sounds all good. Okay, when I hit play, all right. If not, hit a 2 if you can't hear it when it's playing.
I give credit to white people and their creativity and hatred. Because to call you guys sand, I thought that was very creative.
No,
The desert, sand, let's add them together.
I've even added a different level. So sometimes they use another slur is like they call us glass.
Glass?
Yes.
Why?
Because what happens when you nuke the sand?
Sand. Oh, glass.
Sand turns into glass. So they're not just, they're no physics.
It's almost like
they are like scientists.
You upgraded.
The sand to glass.
There's glass. They got so many.
And it's funny here because they are talking about the fact that, yes, we know that supremacists can be the most vile people on the planet, and they're not just, you know, vile towards us, they're vile towards other groups. They use other minority groups when they need them, and when they don't need them, they're happy to erase them, just like they're doing right now in Iran. So no one's sitting here acting like we're the only people who have an enemy in white supremacy. Okay. However, once again, I will state that it's still, you have to be very careful, particularly with these populations of people who spend the majority of their time making themselves adjacent to whiteness, you know, then coming on side or appearing to come on side when whiteness turns around and says you're not white enough. That's when I'm quite happy to close the door and say, I don't care, respectfully. Like, that's your own problem, that's your own issue. I don't care. You know, you're gonna have to deal with it now. We've got our own problems to deal with. You deal with yours, we'll deal with ours. That's it. Never the twain shall meet. And even here saying, oh, you know, they used to call you sand N-words. Respectfully, they didn't. Used to call sand N-words was given to the indigenous people of the Arabian Peninsula and the Middle East, the people who were much darker skinned, the black populations that are still there. So it wasn't like they just saw some Bassem Youssef, Zai Hawass looking guy and called him a sand N-word. It's like, no, yeah, they saw the black populations, yeah, the black Qataris who used to rule Qatar, the black Yemenis and the black Omanis who were still there. Those black populations, that's where the phrase sand N-word came from, because those were black populations who were associated with the Middle East. Now, the fact that you have paler, light colored people who are now in control of the Middle East, a lot of that is due to the handover or the close of colonialism and imperialism and using caste systems and enforcing caste systems across these populations so that the lighter skinned groups were the ones who took power, and they created lighter skinned royal lineages in a lot of these places. But sand N-word was never for your everyday light-skinned Arab. It was for the people of the Middle East, who for all intents and purposes, for a large part of history, were dark-skinned like Africans. Just to be clear on that.
They got so many racial slurs. Mud sharks.
Did you lose any other opportunities?
Babies.
I have to say that like my auditioning flow has dried up. The flow for auditions.
Oh, I think it's pretty much a lot of people. Yeah. It's a lot.
Do you think you'll ever get back into?
I don't know.
Huh?
I don't know.
You live at, he does his live. You do your live because I think.
No, I'm talking like
I'm thankful that I have stand-up comedy.
Yeah, like on the acting side.
I have to go through gatekeepers. I just like me and the audience.
And just do
it for
them.
them.
Wait on anybody.
Do you think you'll get like a Netflix special?
I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah.
See, this is what it is. You just gotta keep, but you know, doing your live and selling out.
Because you know you have been in this more than me. There was like a golden era of Netflix specials. You know, like the teens of like
of course.
But I think it's not as appealing as
people. Special. The word special is overused.
Yeah,
because there was a time when you saw a special, George Carlin special.
Oh, sure, like Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy is special. Yeah. It was like certain people had special.
It was special.
Yeah, it was a big deal. Like, wow, because this person has worked this out. Chris Rock, that was a big deal. Bigger and blacker. Don't shoot the match. It was Chris Rock. It was Louis C.K. It was a special. And now it's anybody that checks a box now.
Now, an hour.
But half the time they're not even doing an hour. Because,
by the way, guys, listen to what Wildflowers put in the chat. Don't be a hater. Hit the like button. Yeah. We're gonna get into the ancient Egypt discussion very, very soon. I just wanted to kind of like preamble with a little bit of setting the scene for the kind of discussion they were having.
Because you can tell by the way they edited that they were getting eating their you know what I mean? But it's like people don't even have enough time. They don't even have a strong 30. They're doing a whole hour of this trash, and there's a bunch of it, man. You just go. Well, I actually had a friend. She's a young comic, and we were at my friend's house. I said she thought I was being ridiculous about talking about specials. Like, I would like to see people who are ready for this, unless you're doing like a 15-minute set, 10-minute set. And I said, let's watch some specials for the hell of it. So she thought I was being negative. I said, let's watch. So she watched just some newbies, right? And she goes, oh my God, this is so bad. I go, I told you. Now let's watch Dave Attell. We watched Dave Attell, who I know Dave has been doing it almost 40 years. Watch Dave Attell special. We were laughing right out the gate. Let's watch Mark. Let's watch Bill Burr. Let's watch Mark Maron. Let's watch, let's watch Earthquake. Let's watch people who've been doing it.
Okay. Well, let's skip a little bit. Not being a thingy. This is maybe, in fact, let's just get into it. I'm going to close this now. I thought there was going to be a little bit more discussion there on the whole sand N word. I thought that would have been an interesting discussion. We're going to close that now. And let's just get into the controversy. So there are two around 10-minute clips where they talk about the subject of ancient Kemet. Okay. And, usually, as usual, it looks like Bassem Youssef is pretty indignant. So let's jump in and see if there's validity to his claims, or see if, once again, he's just drawing from his Arab nationalist bag, like he likes to draw from. But let's go.
If you go to Egypt, for example, have you been to Cairo? Have you went down to Aswan or Luxor?
No, I didn't Luxor.
You will find, like, Egypt is so diverse. You will find people with a little bit fair skin like me, and you have people as dark as you down in the south.
So here we go. So straight away, he's gone in with that normal, usual Egyptian talking point. Oh, Egypt's so diverse. One of the things that you'll see from the modern Egyptian population when they're trying to argue that the ancient Egyptians weren't black is that they like to pick pictures of people who are black in their population, black but Egyptian, and then say, see, we do look like the pharaohs. Like, they do that all the time. So they like to pick pictures of their darkest Saidi people or their Nubian population and say, hey, look how much like the pharaohs these guys look like. They're Egyptian. But it's kind of like, yeah, but they're black. Okay, that's what you have a problem with. We don't have a problem with the ancient Egyptians being black. You do. And that's exactly what he'll do. He'll talk about Egypt's diversity. He'll talk about Aswan, but then he won't talk about the exclusion of those from Aswan. He won't talk about the exclusion of the Nubians. He won't talk about the racial othering. He won't talk about the fact that you will turn around and say Egypt had no black people, even though people from Aswan classify themselves as black. Okay, they classify you in Egypt, classify them as black. So on the one side of your face, you'll say the ancient Egyptians weren't black, and on the other side of your face, you'll say, well, Aswan's diversity is a part of Egypt. And this is what they do. They like to double speak, so they don't have to. They can basically have their cake and eat it. We can persecute the black population, we can other them, we can exclude them. But on the other hand, when we need to have a discussion about ancient Egypt, and when we have all of these people who look more like the black people than they look like us, that's when we'll start to include them in the conversation. Okay, so that's what they do. Shout out to Cake Battered. Appreciate your $10 donation. It is much, much appreciated. Leave a comment and I'll try to remember to put that on the screen as well. Shout out to you.
The Nubians,
That's never
that's what-
portrayed though. I've never really see that portrayed.
They never show
outside, like,
Nubians. They would show, like,
as far as like
they're white people.
because I know the Nubians
But
are
what
more
did he
south.
And did you see his face there? That's a very good point that Godfrey's co-host just raised there. He said, look, you can talk about the diversity, but when it comes to the discussion of ancient Egypt, I never see the black people portrayed. In other words, black people don't get representation. So let's not have this discussion about, oh, well, Egypt's so diverse. Some people are so light that then if you go down, they get really dark, and we could be any complexion. Because the reality of the situation is when it comes to the portrayal or a portrayal of ancient Egyptians that you'll find acceptable, you won't want to see the black ones. You'll say that's unacceptable to depict them like this. And you showed your racist bag when, for all intents and purposes, a mixed race woman was playing Cleopatra, who's not even fully Egyptian. We will argue she's partially Greek. You know, we don't know how much she is, but we know that she definitely is of the Greek lineage. Cleopatra was played by a mixed race woman, and even that was too black for you. So respectfully, it'll be nice to hear what he has to say in response to that.
Right.
Show them where.
Whether it's cartoons or whether
Just
even
the imagery that we
movies,
get, the imagery that we get.
They had a perfect opportunity there to raise the Cleopatra controversy there. There's no way Godfrey doesn't know about the Cleopatra controversy. Shout out Godfrey, but Godfrey, bring me on this show. Yeah, bring me on this show, Godfrey, and we can set history straight. Yeah, and talk about history unapologetically, but respectfully, I know Godfrey. He's very well informed. He's very well read on Black history as well. And there's no way that controversy went over his head. So he should have pulled him up there about the Cleopatra controversy. It would have been a perfect opportunity to see if Bassem Youssef would backtrack on that.
Yeah,
Movies, which movies?
10 Commandments.
Yeah, but that's not our
We thought Charlton Heston was Moses.
That's the problem of trying to understand a culture through basically entertainment,
media,
because entertainment is not true.
Yeah.
And here's the issue. He just said there, but that's not our movie. Respectfully, no one cares about Egyptian movies. Okay, let's make that very, very clear. When it comes to the modern Egyptian population, I think they're quite, I don't want to say delirious, delusional. That's the word. They're quite delusional about the world's perspective on them and their role in us understanding the ancient Egyptian civilization. No one is looking to the modern Egyptian people, the modern Egyptian population, to inform us about ancient Egypt. No one cares about their input. No one cares about their perspectives on it. No one wants to hear from modern Egyptian Egyptologists. No one cares about Zahi Hawass. Let's just keep it really funky. You guys are nothing but gatekeepers. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. It is just the fact of the matter. So what's the point in saying, oh, it's not our movies? You don't make movies. Has anyone ever in history watched a movie about ancient Egypt that was done by Egyptians? Has anyone ever watched any historical fiction or historical documentary or anything that was produced by the modern Egyptian population? No, because no one needs you for that and no one asks you for that. So stop inserting yourself in a conversation that no one's including you in. You are the population that currently resides in the place where the artifacts are of the civilization that people are interested in. No one is looking to you as an authority on the subject. No one needs your entertainment. No one needs your media. No one needs your archaeology. No one needs anything from you. You've just inserted yourself and now you're a gatekeeper. That's just a fact, okay? So saying, oh, well, you don't make anything. No one looks to you for anything. So don't be delusional about what your role is in this. And this is the thing, they keep continually trying to insert themselves because they have this, one of the biggest problems that modern Egyptian population have, and I'll say this very, very quickly, is that they have this very schizophrenic relationship with the ancient Egyptian civilization. It's a civilization that for hundreds of years, they rejected and regarded as pagan. It's a civilization that they knew their ancestry had no part in. They saw it as something to be deconstructed. They saw it as something to be destroyed. We know that the limestone, by the way, go to the pyramids, you will not see one single block of limestone, because every single piece of limestone casing that sat around the pyramid of Khafre, Khufu, and Menkaure has been carted off and used to build a mosque somewhere, in Cairo. That's what's happened to all of the limestone. Those and don't blame a earthquake, because respectfully, there were hundreds of earthquakes in the time in which the pyramids were constructed to common date. That deconstruction was done deliberately by the Islamic population who had no respect and no regard for those ancient monuments. And they made sure that they destroyed those pyramids to the extent where it was impossible to rebuild what was lost. And no earthquake can do that. So respectfully, they've got this schizophrenic relationship with the ancient Egyptian monuments and the ancient Egyptian civilization, which they know is pagan, but they try and reconcile it as much as possible with their Islamic belief system. The two are not compatible. But here's money. Here's money and global respect over here with this African civilization that had nothing to do with us. And here's us with our religious beliefs. Where do we go? And they've chosen the middle ground. They've chosen the grift. Oh, they're our aunties and our uncles. That's why we're honoring them, because they are us. Respectfully, stop being ridiculous. Stop being ridiculous. For a fact you have no cultural ties. There's nothing that is a continuity that exists between ancient Egypt and that modern population there. Okay, you are Arab nationalists. Stick to your Arab nationalist bag. It's absolutely fine. I'm not saying you're all Arabs, by the way. I believe you're Arab converts, much like loads of people in Africa. You're Arab converts. But in terms of the ancestry is a result of multiple waves of migration, beginning and most notably with the Greek Macedonian settling, which is where a majority of that ancestry comes from. But we'll get onto that. Oh, let me give a quick shout out actually, because I did get a donation from One Love Soul. Shout out to you. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I appreciate your $5 donation. Once again, doesn't look like you left a comment. Let me scroll down, see your next comment, and just highlight it. No, you haven't left one. Okay, make sure you remember to give one. Okay, let's carry on.
And for example, you have President Sadat, who's like,
Anwar Sadat.
Yeah, you see,
he was like a black guy.
Yeah. Look, so with this whole thing about,
and once again, another example. So drawing for Anwar Sadat, who we know was Nubian, or partially Nubian at least. Okay, a black president. Okay, and one who received persecution because of that. Okay, ultimately lost his life. Now, I'm not going to say he lost his life because he was black, but once again, it's this playing both sides of the fence. Okay, acknowledging that someone who exists in Egypt was black, okay, and was recognized as a black person, and because of that, that was recognized by the population. And now trying to act like, oh, it's just a part of, Egypt's diversity. But it's not diversity you accept. You only accept diversity when it brings you into the white end of the spectrum. The black end of the spectrum, you reject. That's just a fact. Okay. Shout out to Africa for Africans. Appreciate you, my brother, for the $10 donation. Let me just quickly pop that on the screen. Appreciate you. And let me see what your last comment was. I can see a comment here. So I'll just pop that on the screen. Let's see what it says. Okay. So Africa for Africans says, Islam has wrecked Africa to its very core. Yeah, there have been definite issues. I largely agree with that. I'm not going to give a blanket, yes, 100% I agree with that, because I think Islam in its core tenets is an African religion. When I say it's African religion, I don't believe this kind of idea of, waves and waves of Arabic migration forcing Islam upon an African continent that didn't want it. What you actually found is that Africans took to Islam. And actually, for a large part of the global medieval era, were responsible for the spread of Islam. Africans were actually more responsible for the spread of Islam globally than Arabs were, more responsible than people in the Levantine were. Africans were the biggest Islamic evangelists there were. So in that regard, I kind of say, yes, it's an issue and a problem, but the bad parts of Islam have been a problem of our own making. But there also have been good parts of Islam. Islam hasn't always been in the shape that it's in currently, where we have this specific Ottoman form of Islam that's being practiced, which I would agree is poisonous. I think it's had far less damaging iterations on the African continent, but that's just my personal perspective on the matter. Okay, let me carry on.
Trying to turn whatever's happened in Egypt history as white versus left. That is not our thing. This is the white versus left is like an American thing. They are trying to impose a discussion or a conflict that we don't have anything to do with,
like a Western ideology.
Yeah, and projected on some. At that time, this area, Libya and Egypt and Algeria and Sudan and
Morocco,
all of these areas, these were like people with different backgrounds who moved around, and then at a certain time there was a timeline where they drew a line and people settled there, right?
Okay, so largely I'd say he's correct here, but he's correct by default of that's just true of the entire African continent, and many people could say the entire world. Yes, people just moved around. Have the modern borders, and I would say more than the modern borders, the modern caste system had a distinct effect on the movement of peoples around the world. Absolutely, I'd agree with that. But what I want to be very careful of here is what he's going to try and push is this kind of Maghrebian philosophy, for want of a better word, where he's going to try and push this idea. I have a feeling he's going there because most Egyptians do, of talking about, well, North Africa is different. It's not like the rest of Africa because, you know, and it's like, well, respectfully, yes, it is different because essentially North Africa saw far more slavery from Europe. Okay, far more Black Sea slaves, saw far more, you know, of those who then managed to infuse themselves in the population and have eventually over time become the people who are in charge of those populations. So that's why you have that large amount of admixture, okay, along the, you know, the Barbary coastlines, and that's because of the large amounts, the almost innumerable amounts of slaves that have been imported into that region over the past 2,000 to 3,000 years, which have just seen it change over time. But yeah, let's see where he goes with this.
But the fact that you try to go and try to claim someone's history as theirs, you know, if Nigeria, West Africa has a very rich history. If someone suddenly from Europe started to claim.
So there he is. So there he is. He slipped into the back. So we knew we were going to get there eventually. So here's, oh, they're trying to claim a history that isn't theirs. No, first of all, this whole idea of claiming history, what that is, you have to understand is that's a projection. That's a projection of what the modern Egyptian population are already doing. I've already spoken about this gross relationship that the modern Egyptian population have with history in calling, you know, the pharaohs their uncles and the queens and the you know, it's disgusting. It's honestly disgusting. It's not a way, in my opinion, that people should talk. It's not a way that educated people should talk. And also, it's just not a way that, it's not even a way that African people talk. We can talk about our, you know, the people who, you know, created great African civilizations, but I would never look at, you know, Benin, for instance, the kingdom of Benin, and be like, oh yeah, and then my uncles did this. Like, what kind of respectfully semi-retarded way is that of conducting yourself? It's absolutely ridiculous that they even talk like that. And what that is that creates this false emotional tie to a civilization that you should not have. You're doing that as a cope, because then what that does is it creates an exclusivity. It's to say, we are related and you are not related. That's just not how history works. No one talks like that, and for good reason, because people who are knowledgeable about history, particularly people who live in a nation like Egypt, which has seen more genetic and ancestral diffusion and movement of peoples probably than any other region on the planet. It's one of the most settled regions on the planet. You know, the likelihood of any single person carrying a pure ancestry that looks the same as what it looked like in ancient times is astronomically small, much smaller than it is for other neighboring civilizations where they haven't been settled by multiple intruders. They haven't had these very traceable introgressions from different parts of the world. And yet they'll have this talk where they say, oh, well, you know, people are trying to claim our history as their own. It's like, no, they're not. People are just stating that these pharaohs, the pharaonic class, they are African people. They had practiced an African culture. They are, and when I say African, I mean they reflected the modern African populations, not the coastal African invaders, okay, not the coastal African populations that are diffused and mixed. They reflected modern Africans. They reflected them culturally, okay? So if you're going to talk about claiming something that isn't yours, an easy question to ask would be, why don't any of your women melt wax on their hair like we see in the walls of ancient Kemet? And yet we can find populations in Ethiopia. We can find populations in the Hema tribe. We can find in Namibia who still do that. Why don't you melt butter in your hair like we see amongst different groups in Africa? Why don't you wear the Usek neck collar like we see practiced everywhere from South Africa to the Horn of Africa? Why don't we see cowhide shields? Why don't we see, like we see amongst the Zulu, why don't we see any of the cultural continuities, the things that actually made the ancient Egyptian? Why don't we see any of that practice in your modern society? Why were you able to retain nothing aside from the language? Just talk about anything. So you don't reflect the population, sorry, the culture that you're claiming, and yet you're turning around and you're saying that other people are trying to claim your culture as though you are protecting something. No one's trying to be an Arab out here. No one's trying to be an Arab out here. No one's going to say, oh, no one's looking at modern Egyptians going, oh, I want to be just like them. You know, you don't see black people, you know, around the world putting, you know, hijabs on their head in the effort to, you know, reflect the modern Egyptian population. You don't see them dressed like you respectfully or doing anything with it. They're trying to connect with an ancient culture that they understand was or is the same as the African cultures that they see. That's the big difference. Do you understand? Let me give a quick shout out to donation that came through as well. Shout out to Africa for Africans again. Shout out to you, my brother. I appreciate that. He said, you have had great effect on my search for knowledge of our people. I appreciate you so much. By the way, just back from my second trip to Spain and Portugal, Granada, Seville, Lisbon. Oh, shout out to you. You've had a good time, man. If you ever find yourself in the UK, I don't know if you are. No, you're not. If you ever find yourself in the UK, make sure you give me a shout. And it'll be good to buck up. And shout out to the Mighty Walk as well, who gave a $10 donation. He says, Nabdapplaya, Tarseti, 7,000 to 5,000 BCE, Arab invasions, 700 CE, simple. Yeah, I mean, it's more complex than that. I think there's obviously a strong argument there. Like I said, I still think that the Greek invasion, you want to call it invasion? The Greek conquest, that would be a fair word. The Greek conquest was a huge point, a huge turning point in terms of population for ancient Kemet. And they left a large amount of ancestry with the modern Coptic population. But yeah, I'm sure we'll come on to that later. But I appreciate your donation either which way. So shout out to you, Mighty Walk. Let's carry on.
Your heritage, you'll be friends.
Well, they did.
Yeah, and then they stole it. Right?
Right.
Yeah, so
So
That's my
this is me admitting my ignorance because I don't know, and I've often wondered about this. What are the indigenous people of Northern Africa, from Morocco to Algeria, Libya, Egypt? Who are the indigenous people? And I ask that because when you look south of the Sahara, right, and you see everyone, there's some sort of a tonal, type of,
See, I would prefer that he asked that question without bringing in the concept of sub-Saharan, which is something that I think we continually have to contend with. And people have this presentist view when it comes to what Africa looked like historically, because currently we have coastal Africans, and I call them Northern coastal Africans because that's what they are, who basically introduce this different type of phenotype into the African continent. And the argument now being made that the Northern coastal Africans are indigenous to that region and have always looked that way, even though there's no anthropological reason why that would be the case, even though there's no real kind of like defense, there's no historicity to claiming that, a North African 3,000 years ago would have, for instance, blonde hair and blue eyes like the Kabyle people, or even have that kind of like Arab look. There's no historicity to that. It's just simply we're going to claim it for the sake of that's what they look like now, and we don't want to offend people. There is a very clear, explainable reason as to why Northern coastal Africans look the way they do. Okay, it's been traced. It's called the Black Sea slave trade. Okay, it's called the Barbary slave trade. These events and these mass migrations, or I should say mass trafficking of people from Europe into North Africa, is very well documented. It is not a historical kind of like, there's no mystery there. It's well known and it's commonly known and it's easily researchable. So we know when the shift in phenotype began to happen, and we know, when it reached this apex. So trying to push it back into history and ask this question, who were the ancient North African people? We know that ancient North African people were, as everyone described them, they were char black, okay, black as pitch. That's who the ancient North African people were, and actually up until very recently. But the expansion of Turkic and Black Sea slaves into the region has completely changed demography. And by the way, for people who don't think demographics can change that quickly, they can change overnight. Demographics of a nation can literally change overnight. You can have an all black city turn to an all white city overnight. It doesn't take, if there's political and economic impetus, these shifts can happen very, very quickly, particularly if they're unnatural. So that has to be pressed as well.
Connection. But then when you go to North Africa, there is this variety that you talk about, right?
More
and
Arab.
More Arab. Were there ever like an...
And by the way, I will stress once again, North Africans speak Arab, but they're not Arabs. So I have to stress this because a lot of people don't get that. Arabic has been incredibly pervasive across multiple cultures that have become Arab speakers. But North Africans are mostly of Black Sea slave and Turkic ancestry mixed with indigenous blacks. That's kind of where you get the North African phenotype from. It's a different mixture of peopling that has resulted in them than what you see directly in the Levant. There's a difference to the balance. So they are speaking an Arabic language, and what you get is, because people look really similar, everybody thinks that it was just this one group of people. It's kind of like, no, these are just different degrees of mixed race people. You have to understand that. And actually, if you was to go to North Africa, you would see that North Africans are more phenotypically mixed race than they are Arabs. They're just a bunch of mixed race people who speak Arabic. That's literally what they are. You can go to North Africa and see that for yourself. It's not actually too difficult to see.
Indigenous,
I mean, the indigenous people of today were basically, they are the indigenous.
Actually, let me quickly give a shout out to Bijan OG. He's left a 40. What is that? What currency is that? Let me know what currency that is. Is that, I haven't seen that one before. What is that? Yen or something? Left 40 something. Either which way, I appreciate you for your 40, whatever that is. Shout out to you. Let me know if you know. Type it in the chat because I have no idea what that currency is.
There's people who have been living there because, you know,
we trying to say, was it the brothers first?
No, no,
black man. Just trying to get right to the point, man. Was it black? Well, we didn't
get him, Godfrey, get him.
he said it.
Oh, it's rupees. Shout out to you, Bajan. Well, I'm guessing who is tuning in from India. I appreciate the rupees. Shout out to you.
No, man, I was keeping real, man. When the brothers was there first, man, he was building the pyramid, and the Arab said, "Hey, man, that's our." We was like, "Nah, man, we trying to build some triangles. Here you come with this bush, and you coming there, man." The brothers, he want to know, was it black, man? Was brothers in there like, "What's up, King? All right, Pharaoh, what's going on? Who these motherfuckers? Some Arab motherfuckers." Well,
get him, Godfrey. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's joking, but he ain't joking. It's a fact at the end of the day. That's what we need to hear. Okay, he's hitting with the hard question there. We want to know who built the damn pyramids. Were they brothers? Yeah, were they Africans? Yeah, were they Africans that like modern Africans? Yeah, that's the question that's being asked there.
I don't know.
You see, this is what happens when you watch too much entertainment. Pyramids were built by rappers, dude. Anyway, no. So to ask you questions. So, for example, in North Africa, for example, you have Morocco and Algeria. You have like the Berber living there, and the Amazigh. In
and to be clear as well, Berber is not a race. Okay, Berber is not a race. Berber is a language family, and within a single nation like Algeria, for instance, you can get pitch black Berbers and you can get literally white Berbers. Okay, so Berber's not a race, and I always hear Berber used interchangeably with Amazigh as this kind of like trying to create this false idea of a race of people, and it's not a race. Okay, it's essentially a group of languages that were spoken that have been infused into the various different groups that have found themselves within the Berber regions. Okay, but it's not a race. There's no Berber race, to be very, very clear.
Egypt, there was a mixture of so many cultures that accumulated over the years. So it was always been the Egyptians who were there for, like, we call them now Copts. We call them.
Here we go. Okay, so this is where the vague. It's always been Egyptians, but then now he's actually drilled down to something. It's like, oh, we call them now Copts. So this is what you'll see. Now it's kind of like the Copts. The Copts are the only ones who have the true Egyptian lineage. We now call them the Copts. I will once again stand relatively resolute on the fact that the people who are classified as the Copts are not the closest or the truest lineage. And by the way, I'm very well aware that you get black Copts. Okay, Copts can come up, but the Copts, as someone has already put in the chat, are Greeks. Okay, the Copts were converts. One of the reasons I argue that the Copts are not the indigenous is because the Copts had very little, very, very little ties to the ancient Egyptian culture, and that was very much seen in their behavior. The Copts were likely the descendants of the ancient Greeks, and this is one of the reasons why, as soon as they converted to Christianity, they were the most destructive people in ancient Egyptian history. I will repeat, they were the most destructive people in ancient Egyptian history. They went through temple after temple, shrine after shrine, tomb after tomb, and they defaced everything. They destroyed, they pulled down statues, they were responsible for more destruction, and they did this almost immediately upon conversion. So it's not like thousands of years transpired. Now, who or what kind of people would do that? And this is the irony now. He's sitting here like many modern Egyptians do, because they need to claim that this very large group, okay, are the ones who carry the most indigenous ancestry. And so they need to say, oh no, they are, and we're related to them, so therefore we are. That's kind of like where the claim comes from. It's the cops, it's the cops, it's the cops. The reason they really desperately need the cops to be it is because it then gives them a claim to the land to say, okay, yeah, you know, cops, it's the cops. They're the ones who were the true Egyptians. But nothing in their behavior suggests that they were. Their language was written in Greek, and I've already spoken about their language a lot. And that's not, sorry, I say their language. They didn't have a language. Coptic is a liturgical script. They didn't speak Coptic. Okay, they never spoke Coptic. Coptic was just what was repeated in order for them to be able to read their scriptures. But their scriptures and their entire everything they had written down was written in Greek. Okay, it was written using the Greek alphabet. It wasn't written in Demotic. So there was there was no reason for it not to be written in Demotic, by the way, if they were the ancient Egyptians. So this is the thing. They caused more destruction than anybody. And you just have to ask the question, even if you did all convert, is it likely that a people who have thousands of years of ancestry in the soil would then turn around and deface and destroy everything that their ancestors built, the greatest civilization that's ever been built? Would they turn around and do that? Or is it more likely that a group of people that had been settled in that region as foreigners for hundreds of years, first in Alexandria, first in the Fayum and Alexandria, then in Cairo, yeah, large populations. We're talking about over the time of the Greek rule, I will say, of ancient Kemet, we had 2 million Greeks transition from Macedonia, the different places, into Egypt, and that being Alexandria, the Fayum, Cairo, and different places. So loads of them coming in, okay? And they all, when the Romans managed to, you know, take over Egypt, okay, after their 300-year rule, they didn't leave. They didn't exile all of the Greeks. Those Greeks were just the cops. They just became, you know, part of the people that were there, part of the people that were now being, you know, who are now being conquered by their new incoming group. So it's not like these people all were suddenly banished and they all suddenly left. They're just lost. And the people who were 300 years had, you know, 200 years, 150 years had been on the Egyptian landmass, remained in the Egyptian landmass. So the Copts, I'm not going to hear all this because a lot of the Copts are the true Egyptians. That comes from the Schunemann study, which tested Fayumites, and lo and behold found that the people of the Fayum have very similar genetic ancestry to the modern Copts. But that makes perfect sense if you understand who the modern Copts are. But anyway, just putting that out there. Let's keep it going.
And you see everyone, there's some sort of a tonal, you know,
Yes.
type of, you know, connection. But then when you go to North Africa, there is this variety that you talk about, right?
More
and
Arab.
more Arab. Were there ever like an indigenous, you know?
I mean, the indigenous people of today were basically, they are the indigenous people who have been living there. Because, you know,
We trying to say, was it the brothers first?
Oh, did I just rewind it all? Sorry, my bad. Let me just quickly forward that. I don't want to hear a lot.
this is what in North Africa, for example, you have Morocco and Algeria, you have like the Berber living there,
The Berber,
and the
yeah.
Amazigh. In Egypt, there was a mixture of so many cultures that accumulated over the years. So it was always been the Egyptians who were.
Who were there for? Like,
we call them now Copts. We call.
How are you spelling that?
We hold we're like
Coptic,
the Coptic.
C-O-P-T-I-C.
Coptic doesn't mean Christian, but it's just the people who've been living there.
What do they
Also,
look
the
like?
pharaohs, like me.
they look like you?
No, not with blue eyes. Blue eyes, I think this was an addition.
So they're like you. So they weren't looking like us.
You cannot really say what does an Egyptian look like, because I can show you like a palette of different Egyptian faces and skin color. It is
But what
very
about the
diverse.
characteristics? Is one of the controversial things, and we've seen this.
So once again, that need to bring in a modern Egyptian and then conflate it with an ancient Egyptian, which is what you'll see a lot. Oh yeah, well, the Egyptians gonna look very different if you look at the ancient times. Like, no. Let's keep that separate. Okay, you're an Egyptian. Okay. By the way, the term Copt as well. the term Copt itself, I'm doing a bit of research into it because there's a bit of controversy about it, but I'm pretty sure that the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty were essentially worshippers of Ptah. And I think this is related to Ptah's relationship to Serapis, because we know that they had cults of Serapis in, this is me just geeking off a little bit, but they had cults of Serapis in Alexandria. And Serapis in human form was Ptah, okay? And the PT in Ptolemy, for instance, it's my understanding comes from Ptah. And the word Copt is actually just Ka Ptah, so Ka Ptah, which would be, sorry, so that would be Ka Ptah would be spirit of Ptah. And I think that that's where the phrase Copt came from, which would eventually then become Egypt. But the Copts, I think, have a strong relationship to the ancient Greeks, but also there's a wider cult of Ptah that's had itself kind of like sewn into the entire Greek lineage, that I'd like to kind of like uncover a little bit more, because it's not overt. We do have, like I said, Serapis, and you have to do a bit of digging to figure out the relationship between Serapis and Ptah. But I think that will reveal quite a lot, because Ptah was very popular in Memphis and in Lower Egypt. He wasn't so popular amongst the Upper Egyptian ruling families. So I think we'll be able to discover quite a lot by doing that bit of investigation. So I'm looking forward to doing that, but we'll come back to that. Let me quickly give a shout out to the Mighty Walk. He says, my problem is people don't know the Upper was the political center. Very correct. Kush, Nubia isn't a secondary system. The Upper is the originating land for majority of pharaohs. True. The Armana letters, all 300, prove South Kemet's domain. True. It is very often we get, by the way, shout out to that comment. That's a spot on comment. And I think it's happens so often that we get dragged into these straw men, really, for want of a better word, these straw man arguments where we're debating and we're talking about, you know, essentially the conquered part of Egypt or Kemet, the contentious part of Kemet, the violent part of Kemet, which was the Delta region, because so much of the Eurocentric perspective is in this part, which was called Egypt. By the way, Egypt was never the name given to the entire landmass. Egypt was the name given from Memphis north. So from Memphis north was the land that was classified as Egypt. They didn't even classify. You can even see this on old maps. They didn't even classify Upper Egypt. So a lot of the parts where he's talking about now, this Upper Egyptian part, so below Memphis, below the Delta, all of that was classified as Nubia, not, I'm talking about in the times of the Greeks. So they even in that time, that when they had coined this phrase Egypt, half of what we call Egypt today was classified as being Nubia by the Greeks. But that's because that's where the polity was, that's where the power was, that's where the influence was held. So it's very interesting that you raise that point, because we do give far too much emphasis to what was going on in Lower Egypt, and a lot of the time that was just the part they had a problem controlling. But the important part, which we should have had our focus and our concentration on, is often we're distracted from them. So yeah, really good piece of input there. I appreciate that. Let me make sure I haven't missed another one. Kanari, I almost missed you there, buddy. $12. He says, North Africa is akin to South America. Most of them speak Spanish, but none of them are Spanish. Very good point. Very good input. Very good point. Very good input. You had this, so you had this massive influence of a language that, and by the way, that's what highlights as well, is how much language dictates culture as well. That's really important point there. Language can really move to dictate what culture looks like. So what's happened is, as a result of that Spanish being spoken, we have that Latino culture, okay, which is very pervasive. Okay, it crosses over borders in a majority of South and Central America. They have this shared culture that comes from the language, which means they have these kind of like shared holidays and these shared celebrations and these shared cultures that come along with the language. And that's what you see across, you know, Arabic speaking states. You have this culture that comes with the language, but that doesn't dictate the people, who the people are themselves. So that's a really good point there. Shout out to you, Kanari. Appreciate you, $12. Thank you for the input. Let me make sure I didn't miss any others. And shout out to Muka Makantu. Shout out to Muka Makantu. Thank you very much for your $3 donation. I appreciate it, brother. And I think we carry on there. I think so. Yeah.
With I Show Speed, where we looked at the nose. Like when you look at features and you see, okay, why were the noses on the Sphinx blown off? You know, like what was that? And then a lot of this, there are other statues where the nose were removed.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Okay. So these are two different reasons.
Yeah.
The nose from the Sphinx was blown off because there was like a radical guy who thought that in order for people to not go back and worship idols, so I'm gonna cut their nose. Many of the noses that were smitten, these were like when the Christians took over.
So just to be clear here, he's kind of jumped around there. The story of the nose of the Sphinx has moved around. There is no hard line as to when it was destroyed, because you'll have people who will refer to, you know, written evidences from World War, when soldiers were stationed just prior to World War I in Egypt, shooting at the nose for target practice. Okay. But then you'll say people, oh, it was destroyed during the, you know, the Arabic, by some, you know, some Arab ruler, some emir who I should say sultan, sorry, some sultan who was, you know, didn't like it and thought it was idolatrous to have it there. And it's very hard to get a fixed date on when the nose of the Sphinx was destroyed. The one thing we do know is that the nose of the Sphinx has degraded over time. So if you look at, you can find images by Denon, Vivant Denon, of the Sphinx, where the face is in better, it's in more, it's definitely in better shape than it is currently, and it looks very different. But since the various restorations and over that time, the nose has degraded, and it has degraded deliberately. The other thing that you notice there is he said, you know, there was I think he use the word extremist there. I'm going to bring it back. I want you to hear his explanation here, and I want you to see what he avoids saying.
There are two different reasons.
Yeah.
The nose from the Sphinx was blown off because there was like a radical guy who...
A radical guy. A radical what? A radical what? See, what you'll notice is he doesn't want to say a radical Muslim, okay? Or he doesn't want to say a radical cleric or a radical... He doesn't want to say it. Okay, so a radical guy, say a radical Muslim, okay? Because this was an act of Islam, once again highlighting the incompatibility between the current Egyptian culture and the ancient Egyptian society. And actually every exposure that people like Bassem Youssef have had with the ancient Egyptian civilization has historically been destructive. And you can't act like this is universal, because even when the Nubians took on Islam, and it took a very, very long time for the Nubians to kind of like, I'm not going to say fall to Islam, but for the Nubians to be converted to Islam. That took a really long time. I think the date we're looking at was around somewhere between, was actually a process between 12 and 1600 AD. Okay, so prior to 1200 AD, none of Nubia had been conquered by Islam. So they put up essentially a very, very good fight. But then Nubian states, or I should say, you know, the black states of Kemet started to fall after that date. Now, what you'll notice is wherever Nubians were, the artifacts were preserved. The temples were preserved. It's funny how the people who carried the blood of their ancestors protected their monuments. Okay, before Nubia was flooded by Lake Nasser by his ancestors once again, the Egyptians who didn't feel any way to flood the southern antiquities, to flood, the entire island of Meroe, to flood it under Lake Nasser. They didn't feel any way to do that. They didn't feel like, oh, we're losing such a great part of our civilization. Okay, they just saw that they were just Arabs and, well, we need electricity or whatever it was. And obviously UNESCO and the UN and the rest of the world were like, yeah, flood that black stuff. We don't need it. We don't need these black people knowing that they had civilization. They had no problem doing that. But up until literally the day of the flood, that entire population had preserved their monuments. That's why the Temple of Ramesses was overground. That's why it weren't buried underneath sand, because you had a population that respected the monuments. They had a population that respected the monuments. So it's funny how Islam didn't cause them to do the kind of destruction that you guys have done in the north. And that's because you're not of the soil. That's why people turn around and look at you and they go, you don't belong here. You guys are just a conglomerate of who are just like, grifting off the monuments. But this is not historically your land, because everything you've done since you've been there has been destructive. It's only those who have the darker skin, it's only those who reflect their African brothers and sisters who have actually protected the monuments and respected them. That is a fact.
Who thought that in order for people to not go back and worship idols, so I'm gonna cut their nose. Many of the noses that were smitten, these were like when the Christians took over parts of Egypt,
Isn't that funny? Did anyone notice what he just did there? Oh, many of the hear what you just said there. Oh, many of the money when they got these were the Christians. Oh, that's a new word. It's the first time he said Christians. What word did he avoid saying there? Shout out to you if you're in time with me, by the way. I know some of you might be behind a little bit, but notice how he said Christians there. What word should he have used there? Let's bring that back. Let's bring that back and see if you guys clocked what he did there.
Go back and worship idols. So I'm gonna cut their nose. Many of the noses that were smitten, these were like when the Christians took over parts of Egypt, the radical Christians, and
when the Christians took over parts of Egypt, the radical Christians, what word has he not used there that he should be using? It's not Muslims, it's not whites, it's not Greeks. What word should he be using there? I'm not even going to say it. I'm going to type it, guys. Yeah. For those of you who are in time with me, it's the Copts. Yeah. These were the radical Christians he's talking about. Oh, when the Copts, say it. When the Copts took over Egypt, they destroyed the monuments. The Copts, they were the radical Christians. The same people. Notice how he hasn't said that, because that entirely contradicts everything that he has just said. Oh, yeah, the true Egyptians were the Copts. Oh, the same ones who destroyed a majority of the monuments. The same radical Christians who saw everything there as pagan. And now they don't see that anymore. Oh, they love it now. They love the modern Copts. They love ancient teacher, our auntie, our uncle. Oh, lovely. That's not what your ancestors were saying. Yeah, your ancestors were turning up with chisel in the hand. Yeah, we're pulling down statues. Yeah, let's be real. Let's be real. If we're gonna talk Turkey about talk Turkey, that's his ancestors. If we're going to talk Turkey about the ancient Egyptian civilization, let's talk Turkey. Let's be honest about it. Let's not be coy. Let's not play around the word, and let's not lie about this. Shout out to Bassem OG. Said even Nasir grifted a whole temple to America 71. Well, there you go. Look at that. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, that entire temple. Yeah, didn't care. Sell off the monuments. Dude reminds me of Zahid. Yeah, Zahid Hawass. He does. He reminds me as well. D Griff. He does. He actually reminds me. I don't know if you guys were here when I did the live stream, and there was a guy giving a tour to I Show Speed, and my God, they look like brothers, and he talk exactly the same as well. If he became an Egyptologist, he'd talk exactly like another guy who was like, "We haven't invented echo technology." Shout out if you're on that live stream, you'll remember that. The guy was like, that is an echo. You hear that? Aha, echo. That first in Egypt. Egyptians first to make echo. Yeah, so yeah, that dude, he reminds me of this dude over here. And shout out to James Stewart, said this guy just gave away the whole game. Absolutely. But you notice that this is what they do. They like to play around. Yeah, like to play with semantics. Oh, all of a sudden the Muslims become crazy radical guy. Yeah. And the Christian, the cops who he's saying are the true, they become crazy radical Christians. Okay.
Started to kind of like, do it's kind of like an insult, and kind of like a rebellion against like the old religion. So it's really different. It's not like about like changing them. And also even the nose that you're talking about, you will find like completely different noses. Like the nose of Nefertiti is different from a nose of like someone who's like Ramesses. You will have.
See, I think Nefertiti was a very bad example in that. If you're watching my documentary, by the way, the second part comes out today. Give a little one in the chat if you watched the first part of the documentary that I released yesterday on the heads of Hemeyunu, the reserve heads and the head of Hemeyunu and the entire German conspiracy, which saw a whole bunch of fakes flood the market during the late 19th and early 20th century. I suggest you watch it. Thank you very much, those of you putting the ones in the chat. I suggest you watch it because it'll be very enlightening. I'm only mentioning it because he just mentioned Nefertiti's bust, which was a fake. I've always said that, and it's obvious a fake because it's covered in plaster. So if you want it to be real, go ahead, let it be real, but just know that ancient Egyptians didn't make plaster statues. They made statues out of limestone, solid stone, limestone, granite diorite, granite. These are the kind of materials they use to make statues, or occasionally wood, not plaster. They didn't make plaster statues. The only plaster statues we had were all created in a very small cluster of time by the same characters who came out of or who were funded often by German expeditions. That's the word. German expeditions. So they were often funded by them. So we have people like George Reisner was American, but he had links with the Germans. We have Borchardt, who did the Nefertiti bust and many of the reserve heads. We have Hermann Juncker. We have Jacques de Morgan. We have so we have quite a few of them. Basically, watch it. And by the way, just know that the Nefertiti bust is a fake. It's not even up for debate unless you really want it to be real. Like, you have to justify it to be real, because it just doesn't, it breaks too many protocols. But this is what you'll find that they do. And this is why he's mentioned, if you look at the nose of Nefertiti, straight to mind was Nefertiti. Okay, because he can rely on that one. They can always rely on these fakes that were created during this age of fakes. But when it comes to actually the real genuine artifacts that look like real genuine artifacts, that's when it becomes a lot more difficult. Respectfully, I'm not gonna diss Mr. Bassem Youssef, but I would say that his nose is not one that I see commonly in ancient Kemet. Okay, I'm just being honest. I don't see his nose. It's the same thing I've said about Zahi Hawass. I haven't really seen many noses that have that particular shape. It's just a fact of the matter. Out of the hundreds and hundreds, you could say thousands of artifacts that I've looked at, I've not seen his nose shape before. I definitely haven't seen his head shape, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of mummies. Okay, what I see is long dolichocephalic head shapes looking like Africans, and what I see is rounded noses. I mean, like, not gonna be coy about it. I see my nose in ancient Kemet a lot. Okay, I see it a lot. I'm not saying that I'm an ancient Egyptian. I'm not even saying I have ancestry in ancient Egypt, but I'm just saying that I see my features there. It's just one of those things.
Have like different, it's like, it's very it's that's why you're trying to box Egyptians and looking a certain way. If you look at the archaeological paintings for Egyptians in mid Egypt, it'll be different from Alexandria, it'll be different from upper Egypt or southern Egypt. So all through those years, even when the Arabs came, they didn't come and replace them. The Arabs came with a very small army. They settled down and just mingled with the same people, like the same way that the Greeks came in and intermingled with the Egyptians.
Okay, so here he's making a half decent point. Okay, so I'm not going to refute his idea that there would have been gradation and difference between people in Lower Egypt or Northern Egypt and people in Upper Egypt, Southern Egypt. I'm not going to argue with that. I think that's demonstrably true. I think it's supported by literature, pretty much at any age. If you look at, there was just always a difference. I would obviously make an argument in regards to what the range of that difference looked like. I would obviously lean towards it being within the African phenotypic range, and he would say it's within the modern range. That's an aside. But then he's gone on to talk about, let me bring it back actually. I don't want to miss his second point.
Egypt. So all through those years, even when the Arabs came, the Arabs didn't come and replace them. The Arabs came with a very small army. They settled down and just mingled with the same people.
And this is another argument. This is a very kind of textbook argument that you hear a lot of the modern Egyptians make when they say, oh, well, the Arabs only came with an army of 400 and blah, blah, blah. No one ever talks about the size of the army when you talk about a settling event. Okay, so someone tell me, what's the size of the pilgrim armies that fought against the native Americans? Does anyone know the size of the armies? No one knows the size of the armies. It's entirely irrelevant. It's entirely irrelevant because we know over time, okay, people came in waves and settled that region over and over and over again, okay, from that region. So once you have a region under your political control, once you have the control of the borders, once you essentially have economic and political control over a region, you have control over how many people you bring in. We also know that the ruling class like to import slaves, loads and loads of slaves from Europe into Cairo. Okay, so these are the events that change the way or change the demographics and change the shape and the look of that nation. Okay, just like he mentioned the Greeks who came and they settled. The Greeks came in their millions, okay, and settled. When the Greeks came and they settled, they didn't leave. The pharaonic culture was seen as superior to their own, which is why they preserved the pharaonic culture. They preserved as much as possible the euhemerism, which is the kind of like the worship and the worship of ancestors and passing of the passing of the kings and the queens into the pantheons. Okay, this is something that is a distinctly African trait, and this is, by the way, why Greeks and Romans have pantheons. The entire idea of pantheons, these kind of like bodies of ancestors, people who have walked the earth before, who have passed into deification, that is an African idea that came from Kemet, that came from Ethiopia. These are inherited ideas and inherited belief systems that people will just say, oh, it's just mythology. Okay, neither here nor there. The point of the matter is that entire idea and structure of that religion came from Africa. So these people who came from the Mediterranean, came from these various regions, they settled and they stayed. Okay, and that number would have grown and multiplied, just like what you're seeing in America today, just like what you're seeing in Australia, just like what you see in other areas where people have come and they've conquered and they've settled. You see a complete shift in demographics. That is just a fact of that's how history works. We can't change history into something we want it to be.
The same way that the Greeks came in and intermingled with the Egyptians, same with the Romans came in and intermingled with the Egyptians. There were always like a core population that was living there. And since we have been there for like 7,000 years.
Well, that's wishful thinking. The core population that was living there were forced south. Okay. That's the core population that was living there. They were forced south. The core population that you're referring to, we know we're mixed. We know we're greatly influenced by outside cultures. It's undeniable. It's undeniable. So the very people that you're trying to claim are the most indigenous, we already have discussed the fact that they did the most damage and they caused the most destruction, and they had an entirely, you know, Greek culture. In fact, it's funny, those of you who were on when I had that debate with Meta, who's that half Egyptian guy, and he was talking about his family, and then he was mentioning the names of his relatives, and one of them had the name Kyrillos. So he said, oh, that's an ancient Egyptian name. I was like, no, it's a Greek name. Okay, that's a Greek name, but you can't tell the difference because Greek culture is so intertwined in these groups of people who he says are the most indigenous that he misses that. Okay, most of these people have Greek names, not ancient Egyptian names. They'll probably use the ancient Egyptian names as a form of nostalgia more than anything, but the culture and the people in are Greek.
All of these waves of invasions and changing of administrations and power, we became like this incredible mix of different cultures.
Yeah, I've heard different people, like when you look throughout the world, you know, you talk about like if you go to Asia, and you know, you can see that there are different, obviously, Asian groups right within Asia. You go to Europe, you see that there's different European group. But when you go to Africa, and then you go just to North Africa, that is a big difference in change in features.
No, it's because of the color, but also,
but not just the color. Just I mean, because
and phenotype. But you see, it's also it's because of all of that mixing that happened. You know, and this is
all of that mixing. Okay, so are we getting there? Because he sounds like he's telling on himself a bit there. He's saying all of that mixing. So you have to ask, are you making the claim that those people and those phenotypes are indigenous, or those phenotypes and those people are a result of outside admixture? This is where, well, let's see where he lands on this, because it sounds like he's actually saying some truth here. I want to see if he follows through with this.
Why it is very dangerous. I don't like these kind of genetic fights about like our genes and our race. We are just a mix of different human races. And I think
that's an argument, respectfully, that mostly is raised by the modern Egyptians. The reason why you get so much resistance, like I keep saying, from us native Africans and from people who classify themselves as black, the reason you get so much resistance and so much pushback is because that you try to exclude blackness. It's because you try to claim that black people do not have a part of it. If you turned around and you said, look, we acknowledge that we're mixed, we acknowledge that we've had wave after wave of immigration, we acknowledge that that's changed our phenotype, and we also acknowledge that the ancient people who created this civilization were the same as other Africans, you wouldn't get any pushback. People would be like, cool, who can hate on someone who hasn't got any control over their mixing? But you try to push this exclusivity, and then that forces us to have this conversation where we have to remind you about your very well-known and documented ancestry.
It is very dangerous to import these kind of discussions of genetic purity into our area. This is a way to...
There's that talk again, our area.
Split people apart. This is a way to make people fight
because I think people...
And that's similar to what he did with Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart simply said that the ancient Egyptians, I think he just said the ancient Egyptians were black, or black people built the pyramid. And then he went on his story, you don't try and steal our culture, this, that. Why would you have any aversion to someone saying that they're black when you have clearly a black population? Well, it's one or the other, isn't it? You're either okay with the fact that black people are indigenous to that region, or you're not. And you continually fall onto the side of saying that you're not.
people are trying to understand, like, was there an origin, right? Like when you talk about the indigenous people of the US, right? People will say,
Yeah.
okay, hey, you know, that
No, but that was
the Native Americans.
That was like an incredible genocide.
No.
These people were wiped out.
Yeah, no, I know, I understand that. I'm not making the comparison.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
making the
yeah,
comparison.
yeah.
So you're saying these people were wiped out. It's like, well, yes, no one's claimed that there was an event of kind of like ethnic cleansing that took place in Egypt, but we can see in modern times the way you deal with black people in Egypt, even black Egyptians, that kind of weighty persecution, that kind of exclusion has a very rapid effect on demographic shifts. A very rapid effect on demographic shifts. If we can see it right now in Libya. Libya has gone from a nation that was probably under Gaddafi, probably I'm going to make a guess and say probably about 20% like black, to now it's just a smidgen. And prior to Mussolini's invasion of Libya, we're looking at a nation that looked like Sudan. It looked like North Sudan. You can look at the old photos of the old ruling families, the Senussi. This was a nation that looked like Sudan. So what you have to understand is that this is within 100 years, we've seen Libya turn from a black nation for all intents and purposes to a white nation. Okay, that's 100 years. It hasn't taken a massive amount of time for that demographic shift to happen. If there's enough political impotence and there's enough of a poisonous rhetoric within a population, the shift happens incredibly quickly. People can disappear just like that. People are even talking about the fact that North Sudan was a nation which was just black, North and before we even called it South Sudan and Sudan. It was just a black nation. You might have some lighter blacks and a very small, they were a minority, by the way, but look how quickly that tiny minority that was in that northern region of Sudan is spreading and becoming now the majority, to the point where North Sudan is even beginning to take on a little bit of this kind of North African feel to it. It's now kind of shifting in that direction. It's not there yet, but can you see how quickly that's happening? Can we see how quickly that's happening? It doesn't take a long time for these shifts to happen. So this is why you can't have these silly presentist views on populations and demographics, because these nations can change overnight.
I'm just saying the indigenous going to indigenous, and just really trying to, because I genuinely don't know what the indigenous people of Northern Africa, like, was there a beginning? Because when you talk about mixed, when I hear mixed, it implies that multiple people from different places came together.
No, I think that the indigenous people that Egypt, they have been always living there, and their features have changed slightly and be made more diverse with the different waves of immigration that happened all through the thousands of years.
Okay, so let's just remove the word slightly from that, okay, and just say the indigenous people, if there is any indigenous ancestry, which there likely is. You guys who know me on this channel, I'll tell you that diffusion is much more likely. Not saying across all of Egypt, there are definitely parts and pockets of Egypt where it's entirely foreign, and those would be, or almost entirely foreign. Those would be places like Alexandria, the major hub cities, Cairo and the Fayum, which we know have a historical track record of being settled by people. Okay, that's a fact. Okay, so we know that Alexandria was established by, by the Ptolemaic dynasty, or Alexander the Great, so to speak. Okay, and it was settled, and it wasn't even a part of Egypt, wasn't even classified as being a part of Egypt. It was seen as the Greco or the Greek outpost that resided next to Egypt, which is why it had the name Alexandria ad Egyptum, which meant Alexandria near to or next to or adjacent to Egypt. It was never seen as a part. Many people argue it was the intellectual capital of Greece, but other people have argued that it just was the capital of Greece. That was literally where they had their capital. So I know there's arguments between that and the Thebes, but there's the argument to be had, but the point being that Alexandria was not a part of Egypt. It was their outpost, and now it is a part of modern Egypt. So can you see how that happens? It wasn't a part, and now it's been infused in modern maps, and now because it's a part of modern Egypt, it now gets infused into ancient Egypt's history, but it was never a part. Okay, it was never a part. It wasn't. So it was never, to be very, very clear. Alexandria, there was a city there, or I can't call it a city, a town or district called Rakadet. Rakadet wasn't even settled. Okay, Rakadet was just a place people went to fish. So essentially, it was just an empty landmass which the Greeks settled and created a city from. To be clear, it's not a nome, it's not a sapat, it doesn't have any relevance or reference really in ancient Kemetic history as being a part of larger Kemet. So that's important to understand that. But now, if you was to go there, there are monuments there, and people are like, I'm visiting ancient Egyptian monuments. Like, no, you're visiting Ptolemaic monuments. Okay, these aren't ancient Egyptian monuments. So let's be very, very clear about that. Yeah, so you have Alexandria, you have Cairo, you have the Fayum. So you have these different cities where we know there was large amounts of foreign migration, and these cities were essentially in and around Egypt, but they were hubs for foreigners. So we know that's the case. But then we also have the fact that they had the Sapats of Kemet, the Sapats of Egypt, where there would have been indigenous people. Now, were all of these people put to the sword, or did all of these people flee? No, it's very likely there would have been a diffusion of these people. These people would have been absorbed into these invading groups or these settling populations, and they would have contributed to a lot of what makes up the modern Egyptian population now. So would there have been diffusion? Yes. Is it slightly like what he's describing here? Oh, there's been a slight shift. Like, don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. Okay. Don't be. Some of you have no ancient ancestry, and some of you just have tiny, tiny amounts. Okay. Don't be ridiculous with this slightly business.
No, we just feel like, I think when we talk, like a lot of historians, like Black historians say, it's like they leave the Black part out all the time. That's where it's just this negative thing about we don't want to have anything to do with Black people. So they go, okay, so that's why I think they go, where were there any Black people around? So they'll avoid all that.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So Egypt, there was 30 dynasty over 5,000 years.
Yeah.
That
4,000 years. Yeah. If by the way, I think the ancient Egyptian civilization lasted much longer than that. But if we're going to go by, which I'm guessing he's going by, the kind of mainstream academic view, we're talking just under 4,000 years as opposed to 5,000 years. But anyway, let me let him finish.
Dynasty number 22 and number 23, I think they were from Nubia.
No, Nubian dynasty was dynasty 25, not 22 and 23. Carry on.
Number from the dynasty number 24, number 25 were from Libya, right? So they were darker skinned pharaohs
in the south.
And they were darker skinned pharaohs, and they were lighter skinned pharaohs. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that it is, by the time the history that comes here, the Black part is being left out.
Right.
But back in Egypt, we don't look at it from black and white. We have a Nubian culture, we have a Nubian side, and we have a little bit a northern side, we have a middle side.
And this is the issue, which is why the Nubian argument always comes up, and it's one that I always raise, is that, okay, so there's so many errors here that I have to kind of address. So first of all, he's made the errors in terms of the dynasty. So the 25th dynasty is the Kushite dynasty, okay? And that's what it would have been called. It would have been called the Kushite dynasty. The term Nubian wasn't used in. And that leads us onto our second issue, which is the back application of the term Nubian. The term Nubian in Egypt, and he knows this very well, is nothing more than a racial descriptor, okay? When someone calls an Egyptian Nubian, it's got nothing to do with, oh, let me dig into your ancestry. It's just Black Nubian, Nubian Black, okay? It's just their word for black. Okay. And unfortunately, that's something that has been inherited over time. Really probably would have started, I imagine, as a racial thing with the Ottoman Turks. I think they are the ones who would have brought that kind of racial element of the blacks being Nubians. But historically, the first time the term Nubian was used was by the Ptolemaic dynasty, I believe. Okay. So that's when the term Nubia became kind of like dominant for describing people who were south of Kemet. So south of Kemet would have been Nubians. Now, why is that important? Because the dynasty he mentioned, 25th dynasty, and historically Old, Middle, and New Kingdom, people weren't describing black Egyptians as Nubian. They were just described they were just Egyptians. They were the majority. They made up the population. He's trying to act like Egypt's always had this Nubian Arab, for want of a better word, or this Nubian kind of like Arabo-Nubian split. It didn't exist. Okay, there was no way. There was no kind of like, oh, these people are Nubians. Okay, everybody would have just been Egyptian, or sorry, I should say Kemetic. There was no. The people in the south had names for their populations. Okay, names like Kushite. Okay, names like so you had Kush, you had, I want to get these correct. You had Tehenu or Jehenu, which was a description, they say, of Libyans, but it's more people who were in the western region. So the western region. So any Africans in the western region were called Jehenu. But you had various different groups that bordered, and they had their own names. Obviously, by the time the Greeks came, you had Ethiopians being used to describe broader African groups. But you didn't have this lazy thing where a black was a Nubian, okay? Because everybody was essentially, I'm going to say everybody was black, okay? Back in ancient Egypt, everybody was black. But what they're doing is they're using this presentist view where they view all black people as Nubians and saying, oh, yes, that was a Nubian, that wasn't a Nubian, that was, it's like, no, it didn't work that way. I'm afraid it didn't work that way. And this whole idea of there being a Nubian dynasty, no, that was a Kushite dynasty. The people in ancient Egypt were still black. They just had Kushites come and rule. Okay, so Kushites came to rule, but the people of ancient Egypt were still black. Okay, they had a Kushite dynasty, and that's why when the Kushite kings came, they didn't really look different from the ancient Egyptian kings. There wasn't like this massive, if you find Kushite artifacts in the statues of the Kushite rulers, there's no massive phenotypic difference. Okay, you can pull up statues. In fact, have a look at the 26th dynasty artifacts if you want to see some. Now the 26th dynasty, okay, they have more overtly black features than the 25th dynasty, and you can have a look at them. I've got some really amazing photos of the 26th dynasty coffins that I took when I was in Rome. When I was in Rome, in the what's it called, in the Vatican Museum, amazing, and also in Cairo Museum. These 26th dynasty sarcophagi with these people with like really wide noses, you know, really, really thick lips. I'm talking about kind of like overtly stereotypical kind of like quote unquote black features. That's not 25th dynasty, that's 26th dynasty. So this idea that you have this kind of like, oh, well, this was that one black dynasty that came, you know, or he didn't say one, he actually thought it was two, but it was incorrect. But this idea that we had 26th dynasty, that was the black part. That's what they try and claim onto. It's like, okay, cool. No, fine, we'll take that. Kushite dynasty, 25th dynasty, absolutely black. But that doesn't mean the other ones weren't black. Okay, let's just be clear about that. It doesn't mean that we're going to back off and be like, okay, cool, you've given us one. That's not, no, you have to prove that any of these dynasties look like you, Bassem, because you're the one making the phenotypic. Oh, well, you know, we have only changed slightly and we are the true indigenous. Okay, well, show me, name the dynasty that looks like you. That should be a simple enough thing to do, because they like to put you in these kind of like arguments where you're arguing all these little bits. Like, what? How about we don't do that? Name the dynasty that looks like you. That's the simple thing to do. Name it. Name the dynasty that looks like you. Are you going to claim that the 18th dynasty look like you? Because we can go through the artifacts right now. We can go through the mummies right now. Are you going to claim that the 19th dynasty look like you? Because we can go through the artifacts right now. We can go through the steles right now. We can go through the mummies right now. Are you going to claim that the 11th dynasty look like you? We can do this all day. Name your dynasty. It's very, very simple. Name your dynasty. All of those people who are, you know, all of those people who are currently in the chat saying, oh, name your dynasty. I don't want to hear any more talk. Name your dynasty, because we can do this all day. You just name a dynasty, and I guarantee you, yeah, I guarantee you, my community will drop the knowledge on you. We can do this all day. And this is the thing, when you have people who try to come at us and say, oh, well, we're not talking sense, it's kind of like they only raise a polemic argument, and that is they weren't black. And I'm like, well, that's not an argument. Don't tell me what they weren't. Tell me what they were. Don't tell me what they weren't. Tell me what they were. Because if you find me, I will tell you what the ancient Egyptians were. And then I'll prove what the ancient Egyptians were with anthropology very easily. What you'll find with the people who argue against the Afrocentrists is they never tell you what the ancient Egyptians were. They just tell you what they weren't. Oh, they weren't black. That's an impossible argument. I can't have impossible arguments with impossible idiots. So rather than making your impossible argument, tell me what they were. So if you're like, they were Saidi, cool. Which dynasty? Show me the one, and then we'll go back and forth and we'll see, does this dynasty look more black or more like what you're claiming? So that's the challenge to anybody. Name the dynasty. Yeah? Bassem Youssef, name the dynasty. You're going to make these claims, name them. And you're going to find that these people will go silent because they don't have an argument. It's that simple.
We don't look at it as Egyptian from like black versus white.
So it's not like the American type of.
It's just that we learned from the American. They always do the black white. And leaving stuff out. That's
So you're saying that doesn't convert over?
Yeah, that doesn't convert because, as I said, like one of our president was like looked like a brother.
Yeah, like
what it is this whole thing about. And of course, I'm not saying that the racism doesn't exist before skin, because that's unfortunately it's there everywhere.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying.
I'm glad he's finally honest about that. That's the first time I've heard him admit, and you'll find these people are very reticent to admit that racism exists in their culture. And that's one of the biggest and most annoying gaslights there are, because even the way he's saying, he's kind of just throwing it out there as a quid pro quo. Oh, well, unfortunately, the racism exists. It's like, no, that is a major issue. Do you not think racism has an impact on the way that you're interpreting your civilization? Do you not think it has an impact on the way that you're treating your antiquities? Because I can prove racism going back 200 years has been impacting exactly what we consume. It's been impacting everything that we take in from what is ancient Kemet. It's been creating the environment for people to destroy, creating the environment for people to vandalize, creating the environment for people to propagate fakes and to infuse them into the ancient Egyptian corpus. It's been creating the environment to perpetuate delusions of presentism and the present view of kind of like the present demographics being the ancient demographics. All of this is perpetuated because of racism. This is why you can't just throw it out there flippantly like it's just something that doesn't matter.
Thing is the fact that like we don't look at our pharaohs as black pharaohs or white pharaohs. They're just like pharaohs from different they have different looks.
No, that's a lie. You don't look at your pharaohs like black pharaohs, full stop. We don't look at our pharaohs as white pharaohs, full stop. We look at them because we look at them like they look exactly like us. That's what you meant to say. We look at them like brown pharaohs. Notice how he said we don't look at them like black pharaohs. You don't look at them like them. We don't look at them like white pharaohs. We don't look at them like brown pharaohs. Notice how he didn't say that. He's not going to say that because he 100% views them as being this, Egyptians being this kind of mixed middle ground, and they always were a mixed middle ground, even when there was no mixing taking place. So even before the mixing took place, all the mixing that he has described, they were still mixed. You know, make it make sense. They were all the same. We've so much mixing and so much this, that, and the other, but we stayed the same. Doesn't make any sense.
And different backgrounds and different parts. It depends on where did you come from.
Yeah. Okay.
154. We all connected, baby.
Baloney. Show me the blue-eyed pharaoh. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, let's move on. Next one. This is Egypt statue nose conspiracy. So there's only 2 videos here. That's the first, so about halfway through. So let's get the second one underway straight away.
I Show Speed, where we looked at the nose. Like when you look at features and you see, okay, why were the noses on the Sphinx blown off? You know, like what was that? And then a lot of this, there are other statues where the nose were removed.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Okay, so we'll come into the nose film. Let's give a quick shout out to Muka Makantu. I should get used to saying that name now. Muka Makantu, who says the original Kemetic identity is the question from which Bassem constantly deflects. They were closest to Zheng / Nat Dinka / Nuer. Okay, Nilotic peoples. Interesting. I lost my stream. Am I back? Looked like I lost my stream for a bit there. I'm back. Appreciate your input there. I think those populations definitely had representation. I'd have to do more research to say if I'm settled on that being a complete representation of the population. That I've seen other African groups that phenotypically and anthropologically look like they match as well. So I think it could be relatively broad, but I appreciate your input there and your $5 donation. Let me carry on. So we talk about the nose now. Let's see what he says.
Okay. So these are 2 different reasons.
Yeah.
The nose from the Sphinx was blown off because.
Okay, now we had this already, so maybe we can skip ahead a bit, quite a bit. They did a bit of repetition here.
That's why you're trying to box Egyptians in looking a certain way. If you look at the archaeological paintings for Egyptians in mid-Egypt, it'll be different from Alexandria.
We had that as well.
With the Egyptians, there were always like a core population that was living there, and since we have been there for like 7,000 years, all of these waves of invasions and changing of administrations and power, we became like this incredible mix of different cultures.
Yeah, you know what's amazing? I know we've already seen some of this already, but you know it's so amazing how they can swing from so much pride in their foreign ancestry. You know, once again, raising the fact that the nation of Egypt is literally called the Arab Republic of Egypt. So they can have so much pride in ancestry coming from different places, but then as and when it suits their argument, they can totally deny any influence from those areas. And it's kind of like, this is, I think, one of the most irritating things, I think, when it comes to dealing with a lot of the kind of like the modern Egyptian population who are adjacent in their thoughts to Bassem Youssef, which I find is the most disingenuous, because it's like they are very well aware that people will come from surrounding nations. Egypt is very much a hub and it absorbs people. People just come to Alexandria and they settle. And they can be, and I had this conversation with the last guy that I had that debate with on this topic, and they can be like 1 or 2 generations, and they can know that their dad's from, you know, somewhere, you know, in the Levant, and they migrated over. But they think they have a right to say, well, I'm Egyptian and I'm Egyptian now, and my kids will be Egyptian and we are Egyptian and nothing else, and we are related to the pyramid. It's like you literally know you're a migrant. And this is what I find the most frustrating, because even as he's talking, you can see the elements of that thinking there, and they'll accept migration from pretty much anywhere across the world other than from black places. If you're black, you're gonna remain black. And I think that is a response, or at least a knee-jerk reaction to the fact that they know that this is a black civilization. So one of the things that I speak about is if the most racist places that you'll find in the world, well, I'd say like the most racist places that you find in the world will normally have a historic event that involved the usurping of what the native black people owned there. Okay, so if you go to America, for instance, and you look at the sundown towns, of which there are still like 400 in America. You go to America, you go to the sundown towns. All of the sundown towns have the same backstory in that they stole the land from a small black population, sometimes a medium-sized black population, but they went in there with pitchforks of violence, they killed them, and then the town became a sundown town to keep the blacks out. Think of Orania, okay, in South Africa. It's the same story, okay? They're on land that doesn't belong to them. They're in places that doesn't belong to them, and so they become violent. The violence and the hatred towards the blacks is a mechanism to retain what they have, which they know doesn't belong to them. And this is why they actually welcome the numbers. They welcome the Turkic migration and this migration and the Arab migration and yes, migrants, come, ever you are Egyptian now, we are Egyptian. The black, no, black. Why the aversion towards black people? Because they know that the black people are the people who own, or the people who own that culture are the people who that actual civilization, the seeders of that civilization, and they don't want to welcome that in. So there's an ancestral thing. I find racism has different flavors, but it always enacts itself in the same way. It always enacts itself in the same way. That resistance doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from knowing who it is you've taken whatever it is you have from. Let me shout out to a few of the donators. Darius has said, "What's up, King? Good to catch a live in the AM before work. Keep up the good work." Appreciate you, Darius, and thank you very much for your $5 donation. Shout out to RJ McKenzie. Thank you for your $2 Canadian. He says, if he cares, he should restore the ancient temples. Yeah, I probably missed what you meant there, RJ, but I appreciate that. Shout out to you. James Stewart, thank you very much for the $5 donation. He says, claiming ancient Egyptians look like Western Asians now doesn't fly because so many West Asians lighten their skin. Yeah, that as well is an issue. But they just don't look like them anyway. I mean, there was many things. Oh, got another one here. Oh no, I've read that one already. Yeah. It also doesn't fly because their hair doesn't match. It also doesn't fly because when you have untampered tombs, their skin tone doesn't match. It also doesn't fly because their skeletons don't match. Okay, their anthropometrics don't match. There's just many reasons why they don't match. It's just not a match in any way, shape, or form. Like I said, you find me those tombs full of Asiatic people or Asiatic phenotyped people in an ancient Egyptian royal necropolis, or even a local necropolis, yeah, where it's full of Asiatic. And don't pull out some black looking people and then run your faulty genetics text and talk about, oh well, they cluster with this, or 80% Neolithic North African, so he's not black. No, why don't you just pull me out a friggin' Asian? Why don't you do that for once? Or pull me out a North African for once. They can never do that. You're always pulling out these black looking people with these clear prognathism and dolichocephalic skulls and black people limb proportions. You're always pulling out these Negroes from the sand, yeah, and then trying to convince me through your wizardry that they're not black. Why don't you just pull out? Wouldn't it just be easier for everyone if you just pulled out a cemetery, a necropolis, and it was actually full of actual Arabs? Yeah. They had the full brachycephaly and everything. Do you know what I mean? The full limb, everything. Like, just like, okay, that's definitely an Arab. Look at these people. Yeah, that's this dynasty. Find me the dynasty. Once again, that's a challenge. Everyone out there who's coming to critique, yeah, find me the dynasty. This is the dynasty challenge. The King's Monologue has set the dynasty challenge. Yeah, source me that dynasty that supports your argument. You're not allowed to say the ancient Egyptians were not black anymore. That argument is dead. We're not hearing it. It's dead. It has no weight. What we're asking you to do is tell us what they were and then source your dynasty to prove your claim. That's the challenge we're putting out to you, okay? Simple.
Yeah, I've heard from people, like, when you look throughout the world, you know, you talk about, like, if you go to Asia, and you know, you can see that there are different, obviously, Asian groups, right, within.
I'm also skip over a bit more because I think we've gone back. Well, I've not gone back. It's just they've got the same video.
Of genetic fights
Yeah.
about like it is very deep our area.
I think people are trying to understand, like, was there an origin, right? Like, when you talk about the indigenous people of the U.S., right? People will say,
Yeah.
okay, hey, you know, that
No, but that was
the Native
that
Americans.
was like an incredible
No,
genocide that, you know,
indigenous going to indigenous of Northern Africa. Like, was there a beginning? Because when you talk about mixed,
No,
together, right?
I think that the indigenous people in Egypt, they have been always living there,
Okay.
and their features have changed with the thousand years.
We have
Like black
this is just close to the end, but
so they'll
a lot
avoid-
of going on here. Whilst that catches up, let me give a quick shout out to Macy. Thank you very much. She said, keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Macy, for your $2 donation. It's much appreciated, and all your support does not go unnoticed. And RJ just gave a clarification on his donation comment earlier. He said, what I mean is, if he truly loves his ancient ancestors, he should not steal from the temples and dishonor the temples. I'm sure he doesn't, but I know what you mean in terms of, yeah, this is the thing, like they always come with muted condemnation. We've already seen the way he's the treatment he's given to those people who were the historic vandals, knowing that they have their ancestry. He refused to call them Copts and called them, you know, extremist Christians, and he refused to say Muslims and called them, you know, radical people, radical guys. You know, so he's refusing to acknowledge the very ancestry that he comes from and their role in the destruction. You know, this is the thing. You know.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So Egypt, there was 30 dynasty over 5,000 years.
Yeah.
Dynasty number 22 and number 23.
Definitely had this. I'm just gonna skip ahead. There's not much
Like
the racism doesn't exist before slave. Different part. It depends on where did you come from. Egypt.
yeah. Okay.
What other countries have you been to in Africa?
South Africa.
Okay, so I think this is new now. This is new. So we're on some fresh content now. Here we go.
South Africa.
Incredible. I had like shows there. I did Johannesburg, Cape Town,
Durban?
and Durban.
Cape Town.
Yeah.
Oh my God, beautiful country, beautiful people, amazing, lovely people. I can't wait to go back. I've been to Tunisia. I've been to Libya.
Libya, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and
That's it. Okay, so you've not done West Africa yet?
no.
Okay.
No, haven't done West Africa. Haven't done Morocco.
Okay.
I want to do Morocco. I want to do Algeria.
Okay.
I haven't done West.
I spent 5 weeks in Morocco, and I kind of traveled all throughout. It was up in the Atlas
Morocco's a
Mountains.
beautiful country.
It is. It's very
Oh
much.
my God, that's it's
all throughout, yeah.
on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Morocco. Oh my God, what a beautiful.
The food is amazing. Yeah, so it was cool. What have you learned when you just in the couple of countries that you've been, from south to you know, to your home country? You know, what have you learned in, like, just in looking at some of those different places you've been to? What do you appreciate? You know,
I'll tell you. Like, so for example, South Africa. I have never seen something that is so diverse, whether in nature or in people or in culture or in food. Such an incredible country.
You know, it's funny as well. I've been really those of you who are subscribed to me on my other channel, the King Mono Show, knows that I've been going hard at South Africa the past few weeks. To be honest with you, I'm a little bit fatigued by the entire situation because of the kind of like xenophobic attacks. So this idea that, you know, for me personally, I'm defensive of Africans, and if I need to be defensive of Africans against other Africans, I will be. Okay, anyone can fall into the crosshairs. I've been incredibly critical of Nigeria's, you know, current political landscape, well, historic as well, but current in particular, because of how incompetent it is. And you will hit the critique. You know, you will get that critique. You'll get it at the end of the day. So yeah, it's just important to note that there's no being ignorant here. But sometimes the enemy is within. Sometimes we have to adjust ourselves. There's no kind of like, oh well, you're black, so you got to get a pass. It doesn't work that way. We have to address all of the potential flaws, the potential enemies, the potential hindrances to our progress as a people. You know, that's really important. But yeah, anyway, I'll let him finish his point here.
It's just like heavenly, especially Cape Town. And also, I was also hosted by people who were from Indian origin. You know, in South Africa, there's a huge Indian,
especially on the east side, in Durban,
huge Indian community.
Yep.
Yeah.
What an incredible community that is. It is like a very unique community because they're Indian, but they're also South African.
Yeah.
And they carry both of them together.
Yeah.
It's like they are very patriotic, very South African, and they did not lose their Indian heritage. Also, many of them also are Muslims too.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to just withhold my opinion here because this isn't my this isn't my political channel. I'm not doing that here.
It's just like a very, very, very interesting community.
Yeah, you talk about the diversity, and I think even when you talk about geopolitics and, you know, you start getting into geographical location, this has been one kind of to what we were talking about before. Is Egypt considered the Middle East or is it considered North Africa?
Yeah.
This is bad. This is, you know.
Well, here's the interesting thing. The North Africa has never been considered the Middle East, and the fact that it's been, they had this broader classification called MENA, which is Middle East and North Africa. But North Africa, even post-Orientalism, has never been classified as being a part of the Middle East. So what we're actually in the midst of is we're in the midst of a political transition and homogenization of the region. So North Africa is losing its independent identity, and that entire band now is just being referred to or classified as the Middle East. So what they're essentially doing is they're taking a portion of Africa via rhetoric out of Africa. So they're taking a portion of Africa outside of Africa. And this is happening simultaneously with the overutilization of the term sub-Saharan, which, by the way, is a term which essentially found its was coined probably 60 years ago and wasn't used historically. So even if you look historically at those historically racist Egyptologists, you know, the Hamitic hypothesis lot, the be it your Flinders Petrie or your, you know, Samuel George Morton or any of those lot, they don't use the term sub-Saharan. It didn't exist then. Okay, to them, an African was an African. Sub-Saharan, in many ways, was a response to the pushback of Afrocentrism, to the pushback of African scholarship to say, actually, no, we're going to start reclaiming our continent. Oh, you're going to start reclaiming your continent, are you? But you guys are from below the Sahara, aren't you? You guys can't claim anything above this line here. That was a response, okay, to our scholarship. That was a response to our scholars. It's a new term. And what you're finding is that it's finding more and more, I can't even say legitimacy, because I think if you're black and you use that term, if you're a black scholar and you use that term, I think you're defeating yourself. I would hope that we'd have the common sense to understand what was going on there. If you're an African, you absolutely don't have you shouldn't even be considering that term, because you should know the demographics of the nation. You should know the topography. You should know that there's been no Saharan limitation. You should know that the Saharan belt is an African and black belt. The people who are not black are restricted to the coastlines of North Africa. Okay, Africa in itself is still Africa, even to this modern day. The southern portions of these North African nations still retain very large but black populations, although that is shifting at a rate of knots. But we shouldn't be using that terminology. They know exactly what they're doing with that terminology, is they're delegitimizing African influence in the historical world. They're trying to create these limits, these false geographic limitations on black populations. So they know exactly what they're doing there. And this all falls into the renaming of North Africa as the Middle East, North Africa becoming the Middle East now. This is presentism. The world looks different to what it looked like when I was a child. Right now, people don't realize how quick these shifts happen. Okay, when I was a child, the North Africa was North Africa. The Middle East was the Middle East. Now, if you was to ask a teenager to this day, is Algeria in the Middle East? They say yes. So do you see how the shift in our understanding is happening in real time? This is how they change and they modify history in real time.
It's a question from it's a geographical question. It's a geographical.
Let's
question.
talk about Middle East,
Okay.
because we use Middle East loosely to just make it easier. But the term itself comes from middle to what?
154.
Okay. Let me give a shout out to James Stewart, who said it's not based on science. Blackness scares them. Absolutely. But also I think these people know, I have mentioned before, I've got one more video I want to watch from him, and this is his old video. They Are Stealing My Culture. This is his interview with Piers Morgan. And I think it's important to watch this to get some context in regards to who Bassem Youssef is. But the fear of blackness, like I said, has its roots in stealing from black people. And I think sometimes people know that on a subconscious level, but they don't know it on a conscious level. So the biggest thieves of black history, by the way, is not white people. I'll repeat, the biggest thieves of black history is not white people. The biggest thieves of black history are North Africans. North Africans are the biggest thieves of black history. Right? And I want that to sit with all of you guys. Yeah? They are the biggest thieves of black history. So that's one of the reasons why they're so vehemently racist against black people, because they are aware that they've just essentially been handed the achievements of people that weren't them, or people that didn't reflect them or who they are now. Just like what you're seeing in Egypt. Okay? You're being handed this civilization, but with this civilization comes historical achievements, comes legacy, comes respect, comes, you have a lineage of achievement, which they know it's very easy to steal from black people, considering black people's current position in the world right now, and people's presentist views. If you was to look at the black population, if you was an outsider, an alien, you flew to the earth, you'd think, God, these people are down bad. You know what I mean? And it becomes very easy to steal from those people and to take what they achieved historically and to claim it as your own. So you have to understand that all of those populations across North Africa, whose ancestry comes from Black Sea slavery and various other forms of European slavery, which has lightened the complexion of that entire region, they're aware of that ancestry, and they're also aware of the African ancestry, but they've chosen to be white adjacent. And that means that they are not going to give black people any hope of regaining that history that has been stolen from them. They know exactly what's taken place historically, and they know exactly what they've done. And so they are the biggest thieves. Okay, they are the biggest thieves of black history, to be very, very clear. Yeah. I'm gonna play this for a bit and I'm gonna get out of here soon, because I think when we hit the 2.5 hour mark, I'm gonna wrap this up. So we've got about another 20 minutes max to go. But let's play this. This is historic now. This is going back now 3 years ago. Blimey. Flipping heck, it was that long ago. Yeah, maybe I need to let it go. But this is historic Bassem Youssef and his interview with Piers Morgan. And this is when I was introduced to him as a character. Let me give a quick shout out to Macy. He says, when you have a history of theft, our history exposes the theft. Facts destroy the false narratives. Exactly. And this is exactly what happens in America. This is why do you think they hate black history so much in America? Why would that be a priority of all the things that a Trump administration could prioritize? Because they know, as if black people are too aware of that history, what comes next is the historic reality that everything that they have is a result of the theft from the black population. They're aware of that. They're aware everything that they have achieved in that nation is a result of theft from the black population. So they want to scrub that from the record so they can just claim it as clean as possible. That's what they want to do.
Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored, a big budget Netflix series on Cleopatra has been hit with claims of cultural vandalism. Cleopatra's precise heritage is a point of scholarly debate. There's no evidence that she was black, and the casting has caused major controversy in Egypt, spurring a lawsuit and claims the program makers are erasing Egyptian.
Now, I raised a point historically that there are loads of Egyptian women who share L. James's phenotype. They don't care, because once again, it's not about phenotype for them. It's about adjacency to blackness. Okay, once it's adjacent to being black, they don't want it, and this is why everything that Bassem Youssef was saying was false, provably false. Because if it wasn't false, it would have been proven in that most Egyptians would have been okay with the casting of Adele James. They would have said, oh, well, at least finally you've picked someone who looks a bit like us. But they didn't. You saw the exact reverse. You saw total collapse of the Egyptian population as a result of a woman who was adjacent to blackness. So it tells you everything that they're about in that regard. Let me give a quick shout out. There's a few donations that have come through. So shout out to Nerd Large. Shout out Nerd Large. How you doing, brother? So I grew up in former Sundown Town. Damn. Didn't know until recently. They eminent domained the black people. I don't know what it means. So they eminent domained the black people and created one of the first planned US suburbs. I've read that first part wrong. I'm not reading that right. I'm sure it makes. I got the second part, but yeah, I appreciate that. That's deep. That is deep. Let us know what the name of that sundown town is. James Stewart, $2 says, where exactly do they think North Africa begins? It's interesting. And that's, you know why that's a really interesting question, because it goes back to the borders that were created during the Berlin Conference, the largely arbitrary borders that were drawn during the Berlin Conference, and how much of an impact they have on our modern interpretation of history. Like just like the discussion we just had with Bassem Youssef, who was talking about Egyptian history, and he kept bringing Alexandria up. Alexandria is not a part of Egyptian history. Okay, I shouldn't say Alexandria is not a part of Kemetic history. It's a part of Hellenic Egyptian history and a part of post-Hellenic Egyptian history, but it's not a part of history. So, but it's included because it's within the borders of modern day Egypt. So once again, people have this view that how things look currently can be back applied historically, and they can't be. You have to kind of like have historical literacy of the different geolocations of people, of the impact of certain populations. I've talked before about the difference between like Kemet and Deshret, for instance, where you had geographically adjacent parts of modern day Egypt that were never a part of Kemet. And that's a discussion that people find difficult because they can only see through the lens of what a modern day border is. And that modern day border had no relevance historically. But very good point, and thank you very much for your donation there, James. I think that's that. Let's carry on.
Casting controversy. We've seen, of course, the backlash is normally the other way round. Bryan Cranston was lambasted for playing a disabled character in The Upside, as was Jake Gyllenhaal, who starred in The Prince of Persia, despite not being Persian or a prince.
This is this year. You gotta love Europeans, man. Prince of Persia. And then they gave him like the strongest English accent as well. I will avenge Persia for my father. King Blavatsky. So like, come on, man, seriously? Like, these white people are crazy, man, when it comes to stealing history. They really do go whole hog, man. They really do go whole hog.
And of course, Eddie Redmayne, who issued a groveling apology for playing a trans woman in The Danish Girl. So is casting Cleopatra as a black woman culturally insensitive? Should we care? Isn't the job of an actor, after all, to act? Well, joining me now is legendary Egyptian comedian Bassem Youssef and author of the case The Cancel Culture, Ernest Owens. Well, welcome to both of you. Okay, let me start with you, Ernest Owens. Off you go.
Yeah, I think that this is ridiculous. I think that she is in full range to play Cleopatra. I think people should remember that there was controversy when the late, great Elizabeth Taylor played Cleopatra, and people thought that it was inaccurate for a white woman like her to play the character. History has said that there is...
I would be one of those people. I'm one of those people who said it's inaccurate for her to play Cleopatra.
Some racial ambiguity around Cleopatra's identity. She's definitely not white. And I think to even assume that Egyptians do not carry some level of African ancestry that can have a darker skin complexion is also historically inaccurate. So I think she's more of the ideal of what Cleopatra would look like more than Elizabeth Taylor would be.
Shout out. I appreciate and co-sign what you just said there. She's definitely far more ideal a representation than Elizabeth Taylor. Shout out to Sanico Lasbrand. San Nicholas Brand. Shout out to you, my brother. It says, appreciate the knowledge and build. Well, appreciate your $2 donation and thank you for being here. Got nearly 300 in the chat, by the way. Make sure we got at least 300 likes. I haven't checked up, but hit the likes if you haven't done that already, guys, as we are approaching the wrap up.
And you didn't see as much backlash for Elizabeth Taylor playing Cleopatra compared to that.
That's a fair point. So let me go to you, Bess. I mean, that is a fair point. Liz Taylor was the biggest movie star in the world at the time she played Cleopatra. She was not Egyptian. What's the difference?
Well, first of all, this was Hollywood before it was informed. This is where 1961, when Cleopatra by Elizabeth.
Hollywood before it was informed. So when did Hollywood become informed? So, okay. People make this argument about as though what's happened is anthropology, history, Hollywood, etc. Everyone's crossed this line of information, this fallacious line of now we're informed. And I was having this conversation with someone yesterday. It's kind of like, no, we're just in another dispensation of racism. Okay, let me qualify this. If you was to go back, let's say 200 years ago, okay, everyone's going to believe in the dynastic race theory, okay? Everyone believes in dynastic race theory, this idea that a superior European race came and conquered a mostly black population, conquered and settled the mostly black population. And then they were like, oh, actually, no, we haven't got the support for this. So then they moved on to the Hamitic hypothesis. Okay, the Hamitic hypothesis now was that it was dark-skinned Caucasians, so people with black attributes, but they were white. Okay, so black attributed white people were responsible for dominating the region. Okay, and that actually persisted for a very, very long time until we started to see large amounts of pushback from African adjacent scholars who are saying, actually, no, this isn't correct. You need to give Africa more credit. And then our scholars started to come along. And now they've rejected that. And what dispensation we're currently in is the sub-Saharan dispensation. And that's the idea that, well, yeah, there were black people historically, but they were all restricted below this region. And anything that happened above the Sahara has got nothing to do with black people. We have to understand we are still in a dispensation of racism. What will happen is 30 to 40, maybe 50 years from now, after enough scholars, like, you know, people who are kind of like saying the same thing I am saying, but producing and publishing in that regard, will have the recommended impact on the psyche of the general population, and we'll look back to our time today, and they'll say, God, man, people were backwards back then. Do you remember when people believed that all black people were restricted beneath the Sahara? That's what they'll say. We are just in another dispensation of racism. People act like we're enlightened now. Everybody thinks that they were enlightened. When scientific racism was all the rage, they thought they were enlightened. When eugenics was all the rage, they thought they were enlightened. Every dispensation thinks that they're in the time. Yeah, we are so knowledgeable now. Oh, the advancements that we've made in archaeology and genetics. The geneticists that we have now, let me make this very clear. The geneticists that we have right now doing population genetics are the worst and most racist geneticists that will ever exist. I'm going to repeat that. The geneticists that we have right now who are doing these studies, your Krauses, your David Reichs, they are the worst and the most racist geneticists that the study and the field will ever have. What will happen is over time, they'll get better. And then we'll look back at the Reichs and the Krauses and they'll be like, oh my gosh, these people were nuts. These people were talking absolute bonkers claptrap. But everybody's quoting them with so much authority, just like they'll quote Petrie with so much authority and quote Borchardt and Reisner and all of these other racists who made their racist theories and built their racist ideologies and be like, oh, you know, we're in the enlightened period now. We're not. We're just in another dispensation of racism. You have to understand that. And this is why I'm very unapologetic in my pushbacks. I don't apologize for believing what I believe. I don't apologize for saying I think he's chatting crap, because I know what this looks like. It's historically literate to not sit back and go, oh, well, you know, we're enlightened now. You know, they weren't enlightened. We're enlightened. No, we're not enlightened now. We just got another flavor of racism and another flavor of ignorance and pseudo-scientific nonsense that we have to wade through. We're surrounded by pseudoscience, like pseudoscience and racial science. We are still literally drowning in it. People need to understand that.
We say we're not crazy about Elizabeth Taylor playing Cleopatra either. That was also inaccurate. I don't know where do you get the idea that we're happy that she played the role. As a matter of fact, 1961 Cleopatra movie was banned in Egypt and many Arab countries because of Elizabeth Taylor's stance towards the state of Israel, because they supported them. So I don't.
Okay, so it was interesting. That sounded good for a minute. You know, Cleopatra was banned in my country. Oh, cool. Oh, you took a real stand then, say, oh no, we got to cut that because Elizabeth Taylor stood against the Islamic and stood for you know who. Okay, cool. But that's nothing to shout about. All right. Everyone knows that you guys are ethnocentric. Everyone, that just makes the argument even clearer that you guys align yourself with the Middle East. Okay, you see yourselves as Middle Easterners. You see yourself as Arabs. And it kind of ties in with your nation's name, you know, the Arab Republic of Egypt, that you stand shoulder to shoulder with all of the other Arab nations. You've never had a problem doing that. It doesn't prove anything about why you're having a backlash against a black person playing Cleopatra. It's the same old, isn't it?
I don't know where does he get this information. Second of all, this is the same Hollywood that in 1956 they cast John Wayne as Genghis Khan. So this is a time where Hollywood didn't know any better. Now, the problem for me, it's not about color. It's not about white and black. This is a very reductive way to talk about things. This is the way that Americans talk about it. I'm very sorry. Like, I come from Egypt. Egypt has a very diverse color palette. People can look like me or they can look deeper skin tone like Anwar Sadat, who comes from a Nubian origin. It's not about black and white. It's about the continuous culture appropriation and falsification of history.
It's not about black and white. It is about brown. That's what he means. Okay, notice that every time he says, ask any Egyptian who says to you, oh, we are neither black nor white. Ask them, are you brown? Are you neither black nor white nor brown? Because they'll try and raise that argument like you're stupid, yeah? That logical fallacy. They're trying to throw it your way. Oh yeah, we in Egypt, we are neither black nor white. Okay, so don't bring your simplistic racism to us. We don't assign to neither blackness nor whiteness. Okay, so are we agreeing that the ancient Egyptians were diverse? They could be either black, white, or brown. Or are you saying they were neither black nor white, only brown? That's the argument that he's making, by the way. Yeah, they were neither this nor that. They were just like me. That's what he's saying. He's doing the Zahi Hawass thing, but he's trying to you know, trying to cloak it in these ideologies of kind of like, oh, you know, I'm so above this. It's like, yeah, whatever, man.
history that has been done by what the so-called Afrocentrist movement. The Afrocentric movement started the last century as a way, in a good intention, to teach African American about their.
The Afrocentrist movement, Mr. Bassem Youssef, is saved Egyptology from being completely overrun by Eurocentrism. The Afrocentrist movement is by and large one of the reasons you have so much pride in that civilization. We're the ones that uncovered so many truths. Okay, what you call the Afrocentric movement has uncovered so many truths about ancient Kemet and their role and their influence. Because you know what? Before the Afrocentrist movement, I didn't see any of your scholars progressing the influence of ancient Kemet on the Greek civilizations. I didn't see any of your scholars talking about the influence of ancient Kemet in terms of teaching the world the writing systems, etc., etc. I didn't see any of your scholars doing any of that. Any of your precious Egyptian scholars, all you guys do is repeat Eurocentrists. You took over the Cairo Museum. Okay, it got handed to you. By the way, the Cairo Museum was set up by the Eurocentrists. So it's a Eurocentric museum, it's a European museum. And they gave Egyptian antiquities ownership of it. And all you've done is just grown those museums. But I haven't seen you advance anything that the Afrocentrists weren't the first to advance. So it's fine for you to now turn around and disparage and to spit in the eye of Afrocentrists because you think they're taking it too far. But one of the reasons why Egypt is so relevant today, one of the reasons why it's so respected is because of the work that Afrocentric scholars have done to place ancient Egyptian civilization at the forefront of thought, to place ancient Egyptian civilization at the forefront of what was a great civilization and what was the founding civilization, because that would have been overrun by Mesopotamia and Sumeria had not the Afrocentrists stepped in respectfully.
Rich history of West Africa, the great empire of Benin, of Ghana.
Stop talking about West Africa like it's the only part of Africa. Yeah, I hate the way he keeps doing. Oh, talk about. I'm sorry, West Africa is not the only part of Africa. Yeah, we could talk about all of Africa, which is what I like to do. I love talking about all of Africa. I like talking about West African kingdoms. I like talking about North African kingdoms. I like talking about Sahelian kingdoms. I like talking about Central African kingdoms. I like talking about Southern African kingdoms. And I like talking about Northeast African kingdoms. You don't get to limit what we talk about, what we study in terms of Africa, because you have got a problem with black people. And you want only brown people to be involved in this discussion, because anyone who's saying that this man isn't a racist, by the way, would he be pushing back like this if Saudi Arabians had the same passion for ancient Egypt? And by the way, they do. Yeah, let me just quickly throw that out there, that black people do. Would he have an issue with it? No, he wouldn't. You've never heard any of these Egyptians come and turn around to and turn to these. By the way, because Saudi Arabians and most Gulf states, they don't have any history. They just have sand and they just have sand. Okay, they don't have anything, but there's nothing beneath the sand. Okay, they digged forever. Okay, there's nothing. It's just miles and miles of sand. There's just nothing to find. Okay, in the Gulf regions. That's literally why they're called the Gulf regions, because it's just a big hole in history. Okay, so these people are the ones who claim and they cling on. Have you ever heard an Egyptian turn around to an Arab and say, don't talk about my history? It's got nothing to do with you, Saudi man. It's got nothing to do with you, Emirati man. Have you ever heard them say that? No. They've got no problem with all of these people around Arabia and Levant and even other North Africans. You never hear them turn around having a problem with them. It's only Africans they have a problem with.
Of Sungali. The great empire of Mali. But the thing is, that's why you find people like Kevin Hart, who subscribes to these theories, who claim that his ancestors built the pyramids. I'm sorry, your ancestors had their own wonderful civilization in West Africa.
When he said his ancestors, he's talking about black people. Okay, I'm not even sure what the full quote was from Kevin Hart, but I'm sure when he was making that statement, he was saying black people, because black people don't look upon our Black people don't look at our history in the myopic way Egyptians do, in that Egyptians, my uncle, my auntie, as though you think that you're carrying the ancestry of a certain pharaoh. It's ridiculous and it's gross, like I've said before. No one else in the world does that. And this is why you get so butthurt when people talk about, you know, as an African, I can be proud of all African civilizations, and I am, because I realistically and historically, I don't even know if the African civilizations that are adjacent to me have any relation to me. I don't know that for sure. Okay, I don't know that for sure. I don't know which African civilizations my ancestors come from. It could be all of them, could be one or two of them, could be none of them. I have no idea. But we know as an African people, we can be proud of Africa's achievements because people have tried to disparage Africa's achievements. And now that we've done the hard work and the groundwork in terms of raising the profile of Egypt in the view of the world, you want to turn around and say, oh no, Africans, you can't celebrate that, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Africa. They are culture appropriating my culture, calling the people of Egypt of today, despite their skin tone, that they call us as invaders.
Because you're racist. Simple answer to that. Okay? It's because you're racist. Yeah. Well, as soon as people are racist, no one cares. That's the reality of the situation. You know why? That's why I don't care. Because you're racist. If you weren't racist, I might feel a bit more. You guys on my channel already know my view. Okay. I've already talked about the fact that there will be, you know, genetic diffusion. Okay. There will be, it's very likely that you have a lot of people carrying minority ancestry. And minority ancestry, majority ancestry, to me, it's the same thing. You got ancestry, you got ancestry. It could be one ancestor out of 1,000. It's still an ancestor at the end of the day. That's my view on these things. But you know what the problem is? It's because you're racist. Okay, that's the bottom line. Yeah, as a nation, you are racist. You mistreat black people. Okay, and so now we as black people are going to turn around and be like, actually, you're not even from here. You're not even from here. Yeah, go and celebrate your Arab achievements. Go and celebrate your Levant achievements. Go and celebrate your Black Sea slave achievements, your Mamluk achievements, your Turkic achievements. Go and celebrate those. Okay, because you've done nothing since you've arrived or since your ancestors arrived, but persecute the people who were indigenous, the people who look like me, the dark-skinned people. Yeah, that's why we respond in that way, and you continue that behavior. That's your choice.
They call us as intruders, and they are being erased from our own history.
Okay,
this is something that Hollywood has done over the years.
I understand, but
you erased your own history, by the way. Okay, if by the way, it's not your history, but if you're gonna call ancient Egyptian civilization your history, you've already talked about your hand in erasing it, because we know the Copts did more damage than anyone, and after the Copts, the next most damaging were the Muslims. Okay, the Islamic rulers, yeah, the sultanates. So we have two groups, and then the Mamluks. So it's kind of like you guys just settled, and your ancestors or people where you get your ancestry from are the ones who have been a continual line of destruction to this civilization. And now it's profitable. You want to turn around, do a big massive U-turn, say screw you, yeah, to all of your actual ancestors. Oh, they just came, they were just one or two of them. No, just one or two Greeks, one or two Arabs, one or two Turks, one or two Ottomans, one or two of them. They haven't really changed who I am. I was always here. My ancestors were, oh, you want to turn around and do that U-turn? Yeah? No, you don't get to do that, man. You don't get to do that. At least have the decency to change the name of your nation. Yeah? If you're going to really make this, we are African, we are, call it the African Republic rather than the Arab. Call it the African Republic of Egypt. How about that? You could do that. But you don't want to do that. You want to have your cake and eat it. Yeah? Because you know what populations you align with, where your ancestry comes from.
I throw this back at you. There's this point that we've had so many cases now where people talk about appropriation with actors, be it their sexuality, be it their gender on occasion, be it whatever it may be. And ultimately, I always come back to one point, which is, shouldn't actors do what their job description is? Act. I mean, shouldn't any actor be able to play any part, actually? And once you start making exceptions for that rule, where do you stop?
Is that question for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is not a work of fiction. This is a documentary. This is a documentary. There is a huge difference. This is not The Little Mermaid, which is like a fictional character where anybody can play anything. Cleopatra came from a Macedonian Greek origin. And the thing is, it's not about like.
Okay, so you just say Cleopatra came from a Macedonian Greek origin. This is a documentary. Okay. Qualify that. She came from Macedonian Greek origin. So first of all, why are you butthurt about that? If you're classifying that she wasn't even Egyptian anyway, but why are you butthurt about that? But also, tell me how that qualifies or doesn't qualify as a Macedonian Greek phenotype. Are you able to do that? Is he able to do that? Is he saying that he would have been okay with a blonde-haired, blue-eyed lady playing her? Is that what he thinks Macedonian Greek is? Notice how this is just a line of complaints, but without any kind of like, this is what I believe the representation should have been. And this is what you'll find with a lot of these anti-African people. It's just not black. They never say what they want. They never verbalize, this is what should have been done. This is who should have been cast. This is this is that. They always just say, not black. That's what they do. That's what they do. Yeah. And even all the detractors who support them, they'll never come up with an actual formulated argument. Their argument is always not black. It's invalid. Okay. 2026, we're asking you, like I said, I'm going to put the challenge out again, the TKM challenge. Name your dynasty. Okay. Name your dynasty. Name your kingdom. Name your dynasty. And then prove your point. Tell me who you think they are. Tell me which dynasty reflects that and prove your point. Because we do that all the time. We can do that at a drop of a hat. And I know that I can put that challenge out there because I know whichever you want to throw my way, I'll be able to completely dismantle it. And I think you guys are all aware of that as well. Crenshaw Grinder said, we need to start calling these people Afrophobes. Yes, in their pursuit to de-Africanize Nile Valley civilization. Never mention the Anu and founders. Yeah, shout out. We do need to use Afrophobes. Shout out to my black South Africans for forcing the African continent to coin that phrase. Yeah, we do need to use the word Afrophobes, absolutely. Shout out to you, Crenshaw, for that.
Like the skin color, we don't care about if they're black or white. It's about how Hollywood is so culturally sensitive, and they're so sensitive about all kinds of minorities. But when it comes to my people, we seem to be erased. A couple of years ago,
who are your people? Because I'm sure he just said that Egypt is so diverse, we're so diverse from the north to the south, so many different people. So if this woman, which I'm sure she does, ends up looking like some of the children of some of the darker Saidis or some of the Nubian people, if she's a perfect phenotypic representation of that, how then do you feel like this is affecting your people? Are you going to qualify who your people are? Are your people the Arabs, Mr. Youssef? Because I feel like that's what you mean. I just feel like that's what you mean, you know?
They announced that Gal Gadot, an ex-Israeli soldier who condones her government actions, the atrocities against Palestinian children, she was going to play Cleopatra. For me, this is even a bigger insult. And Gal Gadot is not black. It's not about black.
We all know that you guys hate the little hat people. Tell us something new, okay? That's nothing. So why is it only the little hat people and the blacks get your smoke, but everyone else can do what they want? Little hats and blacks get your smoke. You know what? I reckon if they had a Korean person playing Cleopatra, you wouldn't have had this outrage. Guarantee. In fact, I can almost guarantee that, because they know this is fear. This kind of reaction. This is fear.
Black and white. It's about this idea of Hollywood always stealing the culture of my own people. I don't care what Charleston Heston tells you in the Ten Commandments or Steven Spielberg tells you in The Prince of Egypt, but I'm sorry, Jewish slaves did not build the Great Pyramid. This has been debunked many times by historians.
Let me
so the thing is, like, we are the only people who are not allowed.
Yeah, that was just a gish gallop. He just went off on one there. Big tirade, didn't say much.
To tell our own, we are the only people who are not allowed to talk about our own history.
All right, let me bring. All right, let me. Okay,
I disagree.
Hang on, Ernest. Let me ask you a question, Ernest. Which is, how would you feel if a white actor was chosen to play Nelson Mandela?
How is that an equivalency? How is that an equivalency? Like what? How is that an equivalency? We've gone from someone whose phenotype is debated, it's literally certain to be mixed, and we have a mixed race person playing them, but we don't know how mixed and mixed with what, and that's where the debate lands. It's kind of like, how brown or black was she? That's really what the question is when it comes to Cleopatra. To how would you feel if we had a white person playing Nelson Mandela? What a stupid question. Let's see how my man handles it, because he's been doing well so far.
I think that there is historical inaccuracies there. I think that, I think what he's confusing is race and nationality. And I also think that that is why you don't see as many Black actors upset as Cynthia Erivo, who is British, who played, Harriet, because we understand the nuances of racial identity compared to nationality versus the identity of the African diaspora. So no one's upset about the fact that David Oyelowo played MLK. There may be some people, but others didn't, because we understood.
I was upset that David Oyelowo played MLK. I'm not a fan of David Oyelowo. I'm not gonna lie. Not a fan.
The nuance of racial identity. So when we're talking about race and nationality, those are two different things. But I think the issue that I want to push back on what he said earlier is that there are other actors in this film that are playing Egyptians that do not look like Cleopatra or come from there. And I just feel like the energy being focused on.
I'm gonna have to give him the clickies there. Woo! Okay, with the smoke there. What about the other actors who are playing Egyptians, who aren't Egyptian, who aren't Egyptian, and they're in the movie and they don't look like modern Egyptians? Why have you got no smoke for them? Ooh, yeah. Came with the bars.
Cleopatra is why some people are pushing back, because this actress could easily look, by identity, looks closer to what Cleopatra could look like, but the rest of that cast is fairly white. And
no, like I said before, no problem with the Milkies. No problem with Milky White Steve. Playing a Ptolemy. No problem with with white bread white Linda playing a queen, playing a Cleopatra. But as soon as you get someone with a drop or an association, like I said, like an adjacency to blackness, that's when the issue rises,
And you're not saying anything about those individuals. You're only focused on Cleopatra, who's being played by this Black actress. But when you look at the other cast, I don't think they're all Egyptian. I don't think they all represent the cast.
All right, let me bring in. Okay, let me bring back Bassem.
I'm just bringing back. Say something. You say something, Pierce. You asking the stupid question about Martin Luther King. You say something. Oh, what if Martin Luther King was played by a white man? He's been on 4chan, idiot.
I mean, if this was in a theatre production, I could imagine this happening without people creating much of a fuss. Is it because it's a Hollywood movie and Hollywood's put itself in the vanguard of cultural appropriation?
It's a documentary. Hollywood has been erasing my people from the 10.
What does that mean? It's a documentary. So you want them to resurrect people from the dead? What do you want them to do here? Want to call Dr. Frankenstein to try resurrect some of the ancient Egyptians? Like, what do you mean it's a documentary? What does that mean? Modern Egyptians are not a reflection. What exactly is your point? It's a documentary. What does that mean? We're talking about doing our best to give a representation of what places would have looked like. Okay, to just give a relatively accurate representation. It's a documentary. What he's basically saying is everyone needs to buy into and bow down to the fact that modern Egyptians are the ancient Egyptians, irrespective of the fact that he probably knows his granddad is from Turkey. I bet you he even knows that. I bet you he knows. I bet you this guy has got recent foreign ancestry. And when I say recent, I may be 2, 3, 4 generations down the line. He knows when the migration took place, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care because I'm Egyptian now and they must look like me. That's the argument that's being made here,
allowed to tell our own history. And I'm sorry, I have to disagree with the gentleman. It's not about it's not just Cleopatra. Everybody in that movie, her court, everybody who's supposed to be Egyptian, they look like they came from West Africa, from the south of the Sahara. We as Egyptians,
she has always been in West Africa. They look like they come from West Africa, south of the Sahara. Everybody who's black is black. Really? Do they? Are you even able to tell people apart at this point? I don't think this guy can tell black Africans apart. Okay, I bet you every black person to him is go back to Nigeria, West Africa. You have such a, what about Benin? Your Benin culture. What does that mean? What are you talking about? And you haven't said anything about the white ones. So once again, he's come with his smoke. Or everyone who was Egyptian. No, there were white people there, clear white people in the cast. You have no problem with that. Yeah, no problem with that. So you're just an anti-black racist. It's clear.
Are being called intruders and invaders in our own culture. This has
because you're racist.
Been going on systematically. I don't want to wake up one day and find a museum of the African American culture and history claiming the stolen Egyptian artifacts in the British Museum to be theirs.
No one's going to do that. You're just being ridiculous now. Okay? It's being entirely asinine now. Yeah, no one's trying to make there's never going to be a point at which the modern Egypt is threatened that some random black nation is going to claim ancient Egyptian artifacts as being their own. Okay, so you're just being entirely asinine now. And if you want to actually go down that line, we can talk about the amount of artifacts that are in both the Cairo Museum and the museum at Luxor, okay, which have been claimed from further south. Okay, the amount of artifacts that were lost to the Nubians, the amount of artifacts that were found and ended up and found their way up in the north. Okay, we can talk about that. But you don't want to have that conversation. You don't want to have that discussion. So you want to sit there with your high and mighty self at like every single accomplishment is a result of like, what are you talking about? Like, this is like, it's so annoying. It's almost like the recency bias that people have, the fact that they feel like they reside in a nation. First of all, the denial that you get where people will deny their actual ancestry, and then on top of denying their own actual ancestry, they then go on this violent offensive to prevent people who they know are more culturally aligned than they are, and say, we're gonna just completely blockade you, like you're not going to have any access to this civilization. It's like, and it's really torrid because actually in Egypt, the antiquities there are more racist than like the ones, the Egyptology departments in the West. Like, they're awful, you know. I don't think they would ever train. In fact, someone can have a look at that. Has any black Egyptologists ever gone through the Egyptian universities antiquities departments? If any black Egyptologists have ever gone through there, because knowing what Egyptians are like and how much of a hard time they give to their Nubian population, I'd find it very, very doubtful, you know.
And now I'm hearing that Zendaya, the very popular actor, who I would love her to play it, but Zendaya ethnically is half Nigerian, half German, and now she's going to play. Where are the Egyptian actors? Where are the Arab?
This is just a stupid argument now. So that's like, the argument is, oh, we want Egyptian actors. Well, just be better, innit? Like, what you want? What you want? Why are you asking them where the Egyptian actors are? Because when you got how about the Egyptian actor who played Aladdin? Now, I'm sure Aladdin wasn't based in Egypt. Okay, so why? Surely that you should have had an issue with that. And I'm sure it was an Indian, half white, half Indian girl who played Jasmine in the Aladdin movie. So you have a half white, half Indian person who played Jasmine, and you have an Egyptian who played Aladdin. Now, someone tell me where Aladdin's based, because I have no idea where Aladdin's based. Yeah, it's funny. Liz just said Zendaya is half South African. I didn't know where she was, but notice how he just said Nigerian, because every black person's Nigerian to him. He's just like a typical. It's like we just get credit for everything Nigerians. You know what I mean? Anything black used to be Nigerian, man. But yeah, Arabia. So yeah, of course, yeah, Arabian Nights. So he had no problem with an Egyptian playing Aladdin. Yeah, no problem there. Didn't hear anybody. Oh, where are the Arabs? Where are the Arab actors? We have so many amazing Arab actors. Well, no issues there. No, you're not going. Like, this is a ridiculous argument. If you want Egyptians to get the roles and make more and better Egyptian entertainment industry, if it's that important to you, or make your own movies, how about that? The idea of you protesting a film that you haven't paid for. Yeah, imagine this. Yeah, it was Jada Pinkett Smith, wasn't it, who did this Cleopatra thing? Yeah, imagine a production that you haven't paid for. You're protesting against it because you don't like the color of the person who is playing the character of the person who was foreign in your nation. Yeah, that's what they're doing. Yeah, they're protesting the presentation of the foreign queen in their nation, because they don't agree. They think that that foreign queen, that Macedonian queen, should have been played by an Egyptian. He's not even making sense. He's just anti-black. Do you understand? There's no logic to what he's saying. Just an anti-black.
Actors who suppose it. And the thing is, even like historically wise, you see in the trailer, it's like, I don't care what they told you, but Cleopatra was black. Who's that woman? Why is African American people are telling my own history? She is there. There's all of these.
What? So now you have to be Egyptian to tell Egyptian history. And by the way, it's not your history. Technically, like you just said, it's Greek history. Okay, it was by the time of Cleopatra, we're talking about 300 years, yeah, of Greek rule. Yeah, so technically it's Greek history. Yeah, it might have been Greek history that played out in Egypt, but it was Greek history. And secondly, when has that ever been the case, that only a nation is the one that is allowed to tell their story or allowed to study in that field? It doesn't even make sense. At this point, he's just talking.
Pseudoscience and pseudo history has been going on, and it's
pseudoscience and pseudo history is exactly what the National Antiquities Department of Egypt is about. All they push, all Zahir Hawass pushes, and all those Egyptian Egyptologists push, is pseudoscience and pseudo history, backed up by a healthy dose of tampering and a healthy dose of exclusionary tactics and a healthy dose of gatekeeping. You literally are the top pseudoscientists. You prevent DNA testing from being done on royal mummies because you know what the outcome is going to be. At the same time, you champion for the DNA testing of kind of like out groups in foreignly held areas in the hope that it's going to make your DNA more adjacent to the ancient Egyptians. We know the pseudoscientific methods that you use. They are very well known. So the idea that you're accusing a television production company who's doing a historical biopic of pseudoscience is laughable.
It has implications. No, I am sorry. African people from West Africa did not build the pyramids.
Okay.
West Africa obsession again.
Cleopatra did not like that, and also Jewish people do not build the pyramids.
Okay.
It is time for Hollywood to listen to the people who own that history. So
well, you've made that.
And just one more thing. I just want to say one more thing. Egypt.
So, guys, as you're watching this, I hope you're realizing why I can't ride with Bassem Youssef. He actually occasionally has some really good points when it comes to when he's talking on his political, but this is a guy who doesn't respect Black people. That's the bottom line. So even when his views seem adjacent to Black people, he's just using them, and he thinks that we're low IQ and stupid, so he can just, you know, whenever it suits his agenda, he can just lean to the Black community and appeal for some help. Hey guys, we need some problem. We're having some problems with the little hat people. Hey, we have the same problem. They call us sand end and they call you end. So yeah, we're the same people. Now piss off, mate. This is what you're about. Yeah. This is what you're about. We ain't the same. We are not. We don't have the same struggle. We're not adjacent. We're not close. We're not. You know, we're not parallel. We're nothing to each other. Yeah, you are an enemy, if anything, an enemy of our progress and an enemy of our people. You are a gatekeeper and you are a thief of history.
Egypt had 30 dynasty over 2,700 years. We had kings and queens from
30 dynasties. So he said 30 dynasties over 2,700, which was closer than his other guess, which was 5,000. So just a difference of 2,300 years in those two proclamations, both of which were wrong, by the way. But anyway, let me not be nitpicky, because that's he's not claiming to be an Egyptologist, so that's fine.
From the kingdom of Kush, from Nubia, from Libya, this area had bled into each other and expanded and shrunk into each other. I understand exactly what I mean when I say nationality or heritage or ethnicity.
You both made
So if these kingdoms of Kush and Nubia had shrunk and expanded, and what's your issue? What's your issue? Once again, just anti-black rhetoric, nothing more to it. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, guys, we are now 3 hours. We hit the 3 hour mark. I said I was going to stop at 2.5 hours, and I'm tired, so I'm going to wrap it up, call it a day. We have 300 online, and we managed to maintain an audience of about that size, which has been absolutely fantastic. Guys, hit up the likes before you go. Leave your comments. By the way, if I haven't managed to read out your comment, apologies. You know that I got a lot of love for everybody who's on the live stream, but as you can imagine, with a live stream like this, it's impossible to manage all of the comments on top of the video that we are reacting to. Shout out to those of you who gave donations. They are very much appreciated. So I just want to actually give a quick shout out to all you. Oh, have I seen that one? It seems like the world has this weird obsession with us of West African descent. Absolutely. There's a reason for that. Wait till oh my god, there's a reason for that. Guys, it's gonna get wild. Yeah, it's gonna get wild. I'm just telling you that. When my next big piece of research, it's gonna get wild. Okay, I'm just gonna say that there is a very logical reason as to why we are player one in the minds of so many different people. Let's just say that. Okay, I'm gonna leave it at that. Shout out to Crenshaw Grinder. Shout out to Macy, Nerd Large, James Stewart, again, Nerd Large, again, Macy, James Stewart, again, Macy, again, James Stewart, again. Shout out to you, man. Shout out RJ McKenzie, Darius, Muka Makantu, word of mouth guy. Oh, word of mouth guy. The Egyptian megalithic. Oh, I haven't read this one. Shout out to you. Apologies, I missed this. He said the Egyptian megalithic structures are at least 13 to 20,000 years old. Granite statues of black features are way older than the oldest dynasties. Well, you know what? We'll have to chat about that. But shout out to you. Appreciate it. I definitely am down for the entire Egyptian civilization being much older than people say it was. Shout out to James Stewart again. I think I missed this one as well. The Muslim army that was smashed by the Nubians in 651 was at least 20K. Notice how parts of that region where the Nubians repelled the Arabic invaders are where the Black Africans start. Very interesting. Thank you very much for that, James again. James again. D. Griff. Shout out to you. Bijan OG. Okay, I've read that one already. The Mighty Walk. I'm just making sure I've read them. Kalnari. Mukamakantu. Bijan OG. Africa for Africans. The Mighty Walk. Africa for Africans. Damn, a lot today. One Love Soul. Cake Battered. And my guy Dregger for kicking it all off. PHARONISM, like what people is not real from is not real do. I missed that one as well. Appreciate you. Shout out to everyone. Have a fantastic day, guys. And I'll see you on the next one. Peace.